Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Parkinson's Disease Symposium, brought to you by IU Health and the Parkinson's Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jessica Barch, and I'm the Community Program Manager of the Greater Illinois Chapter for the Parkinson's Foundation. Before we get started today, I will share some information about the Parkinson's Foundation, followed by a brief welcome from Dr. Elizabeth Zauber. First of all, I would like to highlight our agenda quickly today. So after our opening remarks, you will be seeing a video on local Indiana resources, followed by presentations about what's in the pipeline, which has to do with research, art therapy, PD and the gut connection. We're going to have a great interactive rock steady boxing movement break, followed by understanding palliative care, and closing with our Q&A panel. The mission of the foundation is essentially to make the lives better of anyone affected by this disease. Whether you are living with Parkinson's, caring for someone with Parkinson's, or working to end this disease, we are here to support you. To support our global community, we focus on three goals: improving care for people living with PD through centers of excellence like IU Health, advancing research toward a cure, and investing in the brightest minds, and empowering the community with educational resources. The Parkinson's Foundation has a wide array of free resources. We have educational books, a podcast, our Aware and Care hospitalization kit, a helpline staffed by experts, our website, parkinson.org, and more. In addition, we will send a follow-up email to the registrants of today's program about a week from now. This email will include a recording of this program, slides from the program, as well as information about the resources discussed. I also want to share some exciting information about our national initiative, PD Generation. Did you know the foundation is offering genetic testing at no cost for people with a PD diagnosis? Participation can either be in person at one of our participating centers of excellence sites, or now from your own home through a telemedicine appointment and an at-home cheek swab kit. To learn more, visit parkinson.org/PD Generation. Lastly, I wanted to inform you of our wonderful virtual series, PD Health at Home. This initiative was started during the pandemic as a way to keep the PD community engaged. This weekly series focuses on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and highlights mindfulness, wellness, and fitness. And for the caregivers and care partners watching today, PD Health at Home is dedicating the month of May's programming entirely to caregivers. To learn more or to register, please visit parkinson.org/PD Health. And now I'd like to welcome Dr. Elizabeth Zauber.
Good morning and welcome to everybody. I'm really pleased that we can have this symposium today in partnership with Parkinson's Foundation. This is our first and will be annual symposium. The first time that we've been partnering with Parkinson's Foundation since we became a Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence in 2019. And I really appreciate all of the support from Jessica and her team to get this symposium organized, as it takes a lot of effort. Next slide, please. So what does it mean to be a Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence? Well, it means that we're one of 47 centers in the world, that we're made up of a team of specialists who all have special expertise and training in order to provide the best care for people with Parkinson's. At IU, we have 5 movement disorder neurologists, one physician assistant, 4 nurses, as well as multiple physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, a social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, neuropsychologist, 2 neurosurgeons, and multiple art therapists. All of those people are up to date on Parkinson's and dedicated to providing the best care for people with Parkinson's. Next slide, please. Since we've become a center of excellence, we've been expanding and growing our programs. We added our social worker due to support from Parkinson's Foundation. We're working on expanding educational and research programs. as well as art therapy programs that you'll hear more about today. One new project that's going to begin later this month is a caregiver support group. It's going to be virtual and we'll meet on the fourth Sunday of the month at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're interested to participate in this caregiver support group, contact Lindsay, who's our social worker, and that's her phone number there on the screen. Another project that we'll be working on going forward is to improve education and outreach across the state and in particular to rural areas. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have many people at our center in Indianapolis who have expertise in caring for people with Parkinson's, but we know that's not always the case across the whole state of Indiana. So one of our long-term goals as a center of excellence is to do training for other providers across the state and develop a network of patient groups as well as neurologists, therapists, etc., who have special training in Parkinson's so that if somebody is not close to Indianapolis and needs that kind of care, that they can access care close to home, knowing that those providers do have training and understanding of Parkinson's. So with that in mind, I'm very glad that our statewide Parkinson's patient organizations have taken the time to make a video introducing who they are and what they do.
Hello, my name is Christina Vigolaturo. I am 45 years old and I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease at age 41. I'm the current president of our support group here in Indiana called Young Parkinsons of Indiana. We're located in Indianapolis and we were reestablished in 2019 to support the Parkinson's community. There are several people being diagnosed at very young ages, and I invite you to learn more about our organization through a few of our board members.
Hi, my name is Lynn. I'm 58 years old. I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's about 6 years ago. I'm here to tell you that a diagnosis is not the end of the world. You can still have a great quality of life for many years to come with proper diet, lots of exercise, and proper medical care. Another great resource to have is Young Parkinsons of Indiana. This group allows for me to interact socially with people who are going through similar circumstances as my own, and also allows me to have a great informational resource for the special, unique challenges that come with being young and having Parkinson's. So come join us.
Hi, my name is Doug Bland. I'm just showing out with my best buddy, Claudia. And just wanted to let you know that I'm a member of YPI, and I'm on the board as well, acting as secretary. And I've really enjoyed being a member of YPI because we have the opportunity both to have support discussion meetings where we can engage in topical conversation about aspects that are perhaps unique to many of us with young onsets, like still being engaged actively in the workforce. That has some unique challenges, as well as other things. How do we see the disease progression impact us, being on the younger side of the age curve. For me, I was diagnosed about 7 years ago. I'm now 50 years old. And one of the most important and critical things for me in mitigating the disease is breaking a huge sweat. So I like to work out vigorously. But I look forward to engaging more in some of the conversational topics in our support meetings and meeting all of you. I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Hi, I am Roger Jenkins. I was diagnosed with PD in 2005 and had DBS surgery in 2016. I now have Medtronic's Percept model. I am also a board member of Young Parkinson's of Indiana. We want to educate, encourage, provide friendship to fellow Parkies. I also want to thank Parkinson's Foundation for presenting this program along with IU School of Medicine, Neurology Department. Art therapy has changed my life. Remember, if you fall 4 times and get up 5, you are a winner.
Now that you've learned a little more about our organization through some of our board members, I'd like to tell you how you can get involved. You can follow us on Facebook at Young Parkinson's of Indiana. We also have an Instagram account, which is at YP Indiana. And we have a website at ypindiana.org. On that website, you can choose to be a member. There's no membership fee. You just fill out your information and you're automatically added to our communications. We have a monthly Zoom support meeting until we can meet safely again in person, and those details are emailed out once a month to our membership. Thank you so much for watching, and support the young onset community however you can. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kathleen McMurray. I'm so glad to get to talk to you today. I live in Evansville, Indiana. I'm a member of FACP, the Parkinson's Awareness Support Association of the Tri-State. We are a group of people that provide resources, information, companionship to people with Parkinson's in our Tri-State area. We offer a support group that meets on a monthly basis, right now via Zoom. It's for people with Parkinson's and their care partners, and this group is facilitated by a physical therapist. We also offer 2 care partner support groups. One meets during the daytime and one meets in the evening. This is led by a retired chaplain. We offer one of the most critical things for people with Parkinson's, an exercise class called Delay the Disease. Right now it's offered by Zoom twice a week. We offer a monthly newsletter distributed by email to keep everyone abreast of the local happenings. We also have a feature article in this newsletter written by Karen Zimmerman. Normally, we have an annual symposium, but unfortunately because of COVID, we haven't had that for the last 2 years. The best way to get a hold of us is to check out our website at www.pasats.org. You may email us at pasats@yahoo.com, or you may leave us a message at 812-297-8658. We want to hear from you. You're not alone. Those of us in the Evansville area are excited to meet you. There's many volunteer opportunities you can get involved in too. Things as simple as writing thank you notes or checking on members. Or you can get as involved as you want by being part of the annual symposium committee. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. Please reach out. We can't wait to hear from you.
Indiana Parkinson Foundation's goal is to come alongside those with Parkinson's and their families through research-based exercise and support systems. And we do this through our 3 pillars. And our 3 pillars include the CLIMB exercise program, support systems, and educational events. And with these 3 components, we're able to accomplish our mission and empower these people to lead their best lives with Parkinson's. The CLIMB exercise program is a program that was developed to address all of the different areas of Parkinson's and how Parkinson's affects people. Today we're sitting at the Noblesville Climb, and we're about to begin our dance and mindful meditation class. And this class is just one of the different classes that Climb provides to help them work on coordination, balance, and so many other areas of Parkinson's disease. The Climb is an exercise program, but it also becomes its own system of support. People come together, they are becoming a family and providing each other with relationships that are key in Parkinson's, because with this type of diagnosis, people can really go into depression and isolation if they're not connected with a community that provides hope. We know that people, when they're diagnosed, they can really be overwhelmed. And even though they have this diagnosis of Parkinson's, what do I do next? What do I need to be doing? And so that's where we can come alongside and move with them on this journey and help them through the education to enable themselves and empower themselves to know what they need to do physically, know what they need to do mentally, and also spiritually. Again, giving them that hope, giving that community to them so that they can continue to lead their lives in a positive manner.
Can you guys hear me from way back here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah? Okay. Cool. Awesome.
Okay.
Hey, my name is Stacy, and I am a registered dance movement therapist. I am a licensed mental health counselor associate in the state of Indiana, and I have a lifetime of dance and teaching dance. So the way that we're using that in my Monday class is we're doing the mindfulness piece, we're doing the social connections piece, but we're also making sure to put that dance element in, because we're strengthening your neuroplasticity. We're drawing on short-term and long-term memory, as well as doing a lot of exercises that are really good for Parkinson's. We're seeing a lot of research that specific dances such as tango, waltz, and foxtrot are really good for Parkinson's. We have been able to change our formatting a little bit to better suit people in their homes as well. Another added benefit is that we're able to record these classes every week and add them to the library so that our clients can go back and look at them again and again and practice on days when we're not having this class. We definitely want to make sure that we take everybody into account and that everybody's getting something out of our classes, because otherwise why come, It's really for them.
So making sure that these people are connected with their needs on this journey is also very important to us. And we know that when you have Parkinson's, you don't just need a doctor or a neurologist or a movement disorder specialist. You do need those things, but you also need a team around you, including physical, occupational, and speech therapists, an exercise program, support groups, so many different things that we can provide, but then also giving them connections to community resources that we know and trust for areas such as home health care or home safety equipment. So giving them a name, a phone number, and an email helps them with that connection, knowing that they are a trusted community source of ours. With the Indiana Parkinson Foundation, there are a lot of different ways that people can get involved. Number one, I would say that people can share what we're doing with others, helping us raise awareness, because with Parkinson's being diagnosed every 9 minutes right now, we know that there are a lot of people out there that don't know about us but might need us. Indiana Parkinson Foundation is here to improve the lives of those with Parkinson's. Will you choose to move with us?
Hello, my name is John Deck, and I'm president of the Parkinson's Awareness Association of Central Indiana. It's a privilege to have a moment here to speak to you about our organization. As our hosts, the Parkinson's Foundation and IU Medical Center are conducting their 2021 Parkinson Symposium today. PACE was formed in 1981 by Marge and Edwin Schultz, who were a couple who were seeking more information as patient and caregiver about Parkinson's disease. The organization has grown over the years, and we serve Central Indiana as well as other areas of the state in helping with their support groups. PACE has a board of directors of 10 members. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization and are proud to serve the Parkinson's community. Our mission includes distributing information to those who need more information about Parkinson's disease, helping other Indiana Parkinson's support groups, and advocate for quality of care. I want to turn the rest of this over Sherry will share more information about how PACE addresses education and meeting the needs. Thank you. Sherry?
Thanks, John. Hi, I'm Sherry Kaufman, and I am the Secretary for the Parkinson's Awareness Association, or as we are better known as PACE. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we do. So first off, let me thank the Parkinson's Foundation and the IU Medical Center for having us here today. We appreciate them sharing their time with us and sharing your time with us. One of the things that we do is we offer educational meetings. So in the spring, we have a spring symposium, which this year it will be on April 10th. In June or July, we'll have a women's conference. In September, October, we will have a fall symposium. And in November, December, we'll have a caregiver conference. We also offer a hard copy quarterly newsletter, which goes out to your mailbox. And the nice thing about our newsletter is John, who you just listened to, writes up all the articles, or most of the articles in the newsletter, and they're based on the speakers that we've had at our educational meetings. So all the information in the newsletter is fresh and new and the best that we can possibly bring you. The other thing we also do is a weekly e-blast or an e-newsletter, which goes out on Friday morning, usually around 6 o'clock in the morning. The nice thing about this is it has articles on Parkinson's disease and caregiving. It also lists any Parkinson's studies that are going on that I'm aware of. We also have a list in there of all upcoming Parkinson's events that are either from PACE, which is us, or from other Parkinson's groups, be it national groups or local groups, or sometimes the drug reps will also offer educational meetings that talk about certain things that their drug can help you with. Now, these are really nice meetings because they don't just talk about the drug, but they tell you about things that are Parkinson's related, and they have really great doctors that come and speak at these, but they also tell you how their drug might help your Parkinson's. A lot of these events right now are Zoom because of the coronavirus. However, pretty soon maybe we'll get to go back to live events, but neither here nor there. They're great events, and I highly recommend them to you because you'll learn a lot more about your Parkinson's that you might not have known otherwise. The other thing that we offer to you is me. I am here to help you. If you need anything, you call me and then we talk about it and I see what I can offer you. And if I can't help you, I might be able to find a resource that can. But either way, I'm more than happy to try. So I hope you get in contact with us. The last thing I want to do is I want to share my screen with you. And the thing about my screen is it's got all of our contact information on it. So hopefully you can reach out to us to say, hey, I want to get your newsletter or I want to get your Friday e-blast. And the way you do that is you call me, or better yet, you email me. My phone number is 317-255-1993. My email is sherrypacey@yahoo.com. And our website is pace.org. And last but not least, our address is P.O. Box 19575, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46219. We are a 501c3, and we are happy to help you. We are glad that you took the time to listen to us. We hope you enjoy the conference and have a wonderful day.
Are you ready to rock steady? 4, 5, 6, 7.
Ready to fly. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
I want everything you got.
Rock steady!
Come on, man. Rock steady!
Hi, I'm Coach Christy Rose from Rocksteady Boxing in Indianapolis, and
I'm Coach Chris from Rocksteady Indianapolis too. We're super excited to be on a list of trusted resources in the Indianapolis area to provide a better quality of life for people with Parkinson's disease.
so the mission statement of Rocksteady Boxing is to empower people with Parkinson's disease to have a better quality of life through fitness. Our goal is to take the symptoms of Parkinson's disease and be creative in how we lift them up, help them through Parkinson-specific moments, and not just the individuals involved, but their entire family. Rocksteady Boxing is not just physically supportive through exercise, but we're also emotionally supportive, socially supportive.
So when someone walks into our gym, we want them to feel like an athlete. We want to help them restore confidence and have the best quality of life that they can. And of course, in the midst of it, we're gonna have fun and we're gonna kick their butts a little bit.
One of our mottos is don't let what you can't do interfere with what you still can. So we try to embrace the individual. It's the sum of all small victories that equals success. Keep your hands up.
Rocksteady.
Hi, I'm Ryan Cotton, Chief Scientific Officer for Rocksteady Boxing. Rocksteady Boxing ain't your grandma's gym. When you're coming to Rocksteady's gym, it's high intensity, fun, active training that we know scientifically helps combat the symptoms of Parkinson's. One of my principal roles with the organization is to develop the education and training behind the Rocksteady method. Everything we do at Rocksteady is based on science and information gathered through multiple research studies over the past. Rocksteady started in Indianapolis in 2006, and one of our goals is to spread the program throughout the world to the Parkinson's community. With that goal in mind, we are continually developing our educational programs to educate and develop new coaches where they can take the Rocksteady program to back to their community around the world.
I'm Coach William Lee.
And I'm Coach Brian Pressner.
And we're from Rocksteady Capital. Why we love Rocksteady Capital? I know why I love Rocksteady, and that's because I love whipping people into shape. We love working with Parkinson patients to help them achieve their own personal goals and giving them all that they need to be successful and functioning individuals.
Much like Will, I love the part of being a coach, mostly because to show our boxers what they're capable of doing. Parkinson's wants to tell them what they're not capable of doing, but the minute they step in the gym, we're showing them what they are capable of.
I love my Rocksteady family.
So for more information about Rocksteady Boxing and how you can find a program in your area, please visit rocksteadyboxing.org. There's a find a class locator that you can search for within 25-50 mile radius of any zip code in the world. Conservatively, we think we're helping at least 60 to 70,000 people with Parkinson's disease, but as we know, there are millions in the world that need programs like Rocksteady, so we've got our work cut out for us. So proud to be a part of this team. Rocksteady.
Rocksteady is all about tough love. We don't treat our boxers like Parkinson's patients, we treat them like athletes. As coaches, our job is to encourage them to find out what is still possible, find hope, and fight back.
Don't let what you can't do interfere with what you still can.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna open a can of worms or a can of whoop ass. Let's go.
You can do anything for 10 seconds. Come on.
He's gonna do squats and twinkle toes, and I'm gonna get a kiss.
They're damn mean. It keeps me fired up.
Or push back. Yep. Push back onto your feet. You got it, girl. Come on. I didn't do anything. You did it all yourself. I hate you, but I love you. You got 3 seconds. Come on, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nice. Keep pushing. We're getting stronger today. Okay, nice job on the roll. You need to be comfortable on the ground so you don't panic when you're down there. No pain, no gain. Suckers! Got pain. Get that down. Amazing.
Rock steady.
Boxing, fight back.
It's tough love, you know, they want you to hit harder when you don't think you can. And walk better when you don't think you can. I came in on a walker, and I had to bring Cordovan with me. Now I'm here on my own.
Wow, a big thank you to all of those who submitted those wonderful videos. Those were great, so thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter today, Dr. Brooke Walls. Dr. Walls is a movement disorders neurologist at Indiana University. She attended IU for undergrad, medical school, residency, and fellowship, then joined the faculty in August 2019. Outside of work, she enjoys cheering for the Hoosiers and playing with her dog Scout. Please note Dr. Wall's presentation is pre-recorded and any questions can be directed to Dr. Zauber during our Q&A at the end of today's program.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brooke Walls. I'm one of the movement disorder neurologists at IU. And this morning, I'm going to be giving you an overview of current Parkinson's disease research. These are my disclosures. So I'm involved in a few different clinical trials at IU in regards to Parkinson's disease. And then I also have personal shares of Pfizer stock. The brief overview of our talk today is going to include talking about new symptomatic treatments for Parkinson's. We are going to talk about disease-modifying therapies and then some of the clinical trials that are being done at IU. So a quick overview of Parkinson's disease. It is caused by a loss of dopamine producing cells within the brain. This leads to an accumulation of protein called alpha-synuclein that forms clusters outside of brain cells called Lewy bodies. This then leads to the development of motor, which are physical symptoms, and non-motor symptoms that can be found in Parkinson's. There are two different categories of treatment. One is symptomatic treatment. So this treatment is formed at targeting the symptoms that are produced by Parkinson's, and then disease-modifying therapies, which are treatments to help stop or reverse the disease process. So over the last couple of years, there have been new symptomatic treatments that have been approved by the FDA and that have come out on the market. You may have seen a lot of these commercials on TV here recently. The first one in December of 2018 was for Inbrija, which is an inhaled form of levodopa. So this can be helpful in patients that have sudden off time and need something that's relatively fast acting in order to help improve that off time. Nurans was improved in October 2019. The goal of this medication is also to reduce off time. Ongentys was approved in April of 2020. It is a newer form of entacapone, which some of you might be on to help reduce off time. And then May in 2020, Kinmobi was improved, and this is a sublingual form of apomorphine, also aimed as a rescue therapy to help sudden off time. The big elephant in the room, and the question that I think I get asked most by my patients in clinic, is when are we going to have something that can stop this disease or reverse the damage that's already been done in the brain? And these are disease-modifying therapies that we're talking about. Unfortunately, as of right now, there aren't any approved therapies that have been shown to even prevent the onset of Parkinson's, slow the progression once the disease has started, or reverse any of those changes. But this is such a hot area in research, as this would ultimately help our patients. So in order to kind of understand some of the trials that we'll talk about, I thought it would be important to kind of go over some of the phases of clinical trials to help understand where we're at as we go forward. And so clinical trials are made up of 4 different phases. Even prior to the phase 1 study are preclinical trials. So that's looking in the lab using animal models oftentimes. And then once that's been shown to be helpful, then we move on to human trials, which start with phase 1. So phase 1 trials typically include small numbers of healthy volunteers. So these are people that do not have the disease that's being researched. The goal of phase 1 trials are to find what dose of the medication is helpful, is it safe, and then how does the body metabolize that drug. If it's shown that the drug is safe and patients tolerate it well, then it moves on to phase 2 trials, which includes more people. And oftentimes this phase includes people that have the disease that's being studied. So in our case, phase 2 trials will include people that have Parkinson's disease. The goal of phase 2 trials is not only to continue to monitor the safety of the drug, but also to start looking at parameters to see whether or not the drug is working effectively or reaching the goals that they have for the use of the drug. If phase 2 trials are promising, then they move to phase 3 trials, which include even more patients with the disease. Again, they continue to monitor the safety of the drug as well as if it's effective or not. After phase 3, then it goes to the FDA again for review of everything. And if it gets approved, then it becomes available on the market for patients outside of the trial to receive. And then phase 4 is just post-marketing approval and surveillance. So even once a drug becomes available on the market for people to use, there's a lot of surveillance that's done and reporting by clinicians of symptoms or side effects develop later on. So there are over 145 different clinical trials between phase 1 and phase 3 being done for Parkinson's disease as of January of 2020. So we will obviously not go through all of these trials, but we'll kind of focus on some of the main categories. This diagram came from a review article that came out last year, breaking down some of the bigger trials that are being done. So as you can tell, there are many phase 1 out here in this circle. So these are studies that are being done in healthy individuals. There are a little bit more phase 2 trials. So these are being done in patients with Parkinson's, and then fewer phase 3 studies. But again, these are being done in patients with Parkinson's. And then it's also split up. So this bottom half are symptomatic therapies. So treatments to help with the symptoms that Parkinson's causes. As you can tell, there are quite a few of those studies being done, but on the top half of this circle, these are the disease modifying therapies that are being looked at, and there are fewer of those. So the focus of our talk, because there are so many different trials that are being done, we're going to look at 3 main categories of studies. We'll look at gene therapy, alpha-synuclein. Remember, that's the protein that starts clumping together outside of the cells and is one of the main factors involved in disease progression. And then we'll briefly talk about stem cells because I feel like this is an area that people are pretty interested in. So we'll briefly review that type of therapy. So for gene therapy, this is a little complex. So basically what they are able to do is either through an infusion or using a virus vector. So taking a virus cell, altering the virus DNA and inserting a normal gene into the virus DNA and then delivering it into the body to incorporate into brain cells and change the genetics, so to speak, or protein production within the brain. The goal is to work on increasing dopamine production within the brain and also modify connections within the motor system to help improve the physical symptoms of Parkinson's. So stiffness, slowness, tremor, walking trouble. There have been a few phase 1 trials, so trials done in healthy individuals using 2 different types of viral vectors and then 1 type of protein infusion. Those phase 1 studies showed that this form of delivery into the brain is safe and was well tolerated by the subjects. They used one of the viral vectors called an adeno-associated virus in phase 2, so in patients with Parkinson's, but this wasn't as promising. So in those studies, the patients with Parkinson's who received the virus vector compared to people who did not get the active vector implanted did not show any benefit. And so those studies were stopped. A different type of virus vector called a lentivirus was used, and this one was able to deliver 3 different genes into the motor system of the brain. And in the phase 1 and phase 2 trials for that, it showed that it was well tolerated by both healthy subjects and patients with Parkinson's. But in the Parkinson's group of patients in the phase 2 study, they developed more on-time dyskinesia. And so that study has ended now, and they're looking further into this in order to hopefully potentially modify some of the aspects of the study and then try again. So this is one area that's pretty promising, but I still think we're probably a long way off of this being clinically available, as there still seems to be some work that needs to be done in how this form of therapy would work. The big area is targeting alpha-synuclein. And so this diagram kind of shows the process of how DNA, so this is your genetic code, gets converted into something called messenger RNA. That messenger RNA is a modified sequence from the DNA that then forms a protein. So all of this is a normal process within the cell. But then what happens is that protein is mutated and starts to form these clumps that then get exported outside of the cell to the extracellular space. And this is what starts to cause the problem. So the buildup inside the cell can cause injury to the cells, but then the buildup or the transfer of inside the cell to outside the cell can also cause disease symptoms. And so targeting this process anywhere along the way could potentially be a way to modify the disease. So one of the ways to help with alpha-synuclein clumping or aggregation would be to reduce its production altogether. One potential issue with this is your brain makes alpha-synuclein, so there probably is some purpose for it within nerve cells and within the brain. We just don't fully understand what that purpose is at this time. And so one of the fears is if you block the production of alpha-synuclein altogether, what kind of problems or complications could that cause for people? And looking in mice studies, it is shown that there are some potential toxic effects of blocking its production altogether, but then by replacing it through medications or things like that, you're able to bypass some of those toxic effects. But again, there's still a lot more that needs to be done in order to understand that aspect of modifying the disease before it is looked at any further. One thing that has been looked at in humans is beta adrenergic receptor agonists. So these are asthma medications commonly used. They have used them in animal models and have shown a decrease in alpha-synuclein production. But then in humans, there were 2 Norwegian epidemiological studies that were done. So they took 4 million people within this region of the world and monitored them over several years. And they were looking at several different aspects of their health. But what they found with this is in the patients that were on these beta-2 agonists for asthma, those patients tended to have a less risk of developing Parkinson's disease. And so with that, there's a lot of interest in looking at this class of medications further. and seeing if we can modify those or use those in potentially disease modifying ways for Parkinson's. In addition to reducing the production of alpha-synuclein, another method for disease modification would be to increase the clearance. So not blocking the production of it altogether, allowing it to continue to be produced within the brain, but just increasing the clearance of it within the cell, or also the clumps of alpha-synuclein outside of the cell. So this is kind of a hot topic. If you look at Parkinson's research, if you Google it, a lot of these studies will pop up. There are two main categories looking at this. One is using antibodies, so in delivering antibodies to your body itself in order to target the alpha-synuclein clumps and break those down. These are 4 trials that are looking at this form. So prasinezumab underwent a phase 2 trial that just ended within the last year or two. This was the Pasadena study. So this looked at patients with Parkinson's. They tolerated the antibody infusions well. There were minimal side effects, but unfortunately it did not show that over the year of monitoring that patients' symptoms of Parkinson's were stopped. So they continued to show progression of symptoms. However, there were other aspects that they were looking at during this study, and those did show some promising benefits. And so the drug company decided to continue to investigate this medication and start a new trial called the PADOVA study. And that will start enrolling patients in hopefully next month is the goal. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the talk, because our IU is one of the sites for that study. But unfortunately, the initial study with phase 2 did not necessarily show any improvement in physical progression of Parkinson's, but there were other aspects that looked promising. So the company is going to continue looking at this drug. The other one is B2B054 from Biogen. It just completed its phase 2 trials, and unfortunately it failed to meet its goal. And so they are no longer going to continue studying this agent. These are 2 other ones that are in phase 1 trials right now. So in healthy individuals, to see how they tolerate the medication before it is used in patients with Parkinson's. In addition to using antibodies, another route for altering the immune system is using vaccines. So what vaccines do is it induces your body to make its own antibodies against alpha-synuclein. So these are 2, actually 3 drugs that have been trialed. The Afitope PD01A and PD03A have had a few different studies completed looking at these. They appear to be safe and were well tolerated, and future studies are being planned to look at these 2 medications further. UB312 is currently in phase 1 trial, so we don't have the results of this, but it's being looked at currently in healthy subjects. Other ways to increase alpha-synuclein clearance include using small molecules and decreasing neuroinflammation. So small molecules are able to stop alpha-synuclein accumulation by binding to the alpha-synuclein and helping with breakdown of it outside of the cell. So there are a handful of trials looking at that. One of them is mannitol, which is a drug that's been around forever and used for a lot of different things. This ANLE138B is in a phase 1 trial that's been completed, and it showed that it was safe and well tolerated. Phase 2 trials are being planned for later this year. And they are going to look at it in patients with Parkinson's disease and also multiple systems atrophy. So that's a variant of Parkinson's, but is also caused by accumulation of alpha-synuclein. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll have a little bit more information about how effective that is. NPT 20011 and PBT 434 are in phase 1 trials right now. And so hopefully we'll know a little bit more about how safe those medications are coming up. And then ENT-01 is in a phase 2 study. And so this one's a little bit different because it is looking at alpha-synuclein accumulation within the enteric nervous system. So this is the nervous system that affects gut motility. And so the goal with this drug was to attack alpha-synuclein within the gut to try to help with GI dysmotility and constipation. And so the initial results from the phase 2 study showed that it did seem to help with constipation. So hopefully we'll learn more about this medication as time goes on, and maybe something will come of that. Next, we'll talk about decreasing neuroinflammation. And so it's thought that the inflammatory response within the brain caused by alpha-synuclein buildup and other toxic effects within the neurons or the brain cells can set off a cascade that can lead to the development of Parkinson's. And so it's really interesting by looking at these medications because these are medications used in type 2 diabetes. So there appears to be a link between Parkinson's disease and type 2 diabetes. And looking at patients with type 2 diabetes, about 30% of those individuals have a higher chance of developing Parkinson's disease compared with people that don't have diabetes. And so looking at this class of medications, they're called glucagon-like peptide 1 agonists. That's a little bit of a mouthful. But they found that these drugs target receptors that are also found in the brain. And by targeting those receptors, there may be a neuroprotective effect by blocking immune cells in the brain that can set off an inflammatory cascade and lead to cell damage. And so they've looked at exenatide. The problem with this is that it had difficulty getting into the brain. And so they had to modify it a little bit in order for it to be able to cross from the blood into the brain or the blood-brain barrier. And so they're looking at that right now. And then these are 2 other drugs that are in phase 1 trials that may potentially be helpful. The exenatide study, it has been looked at in a phase 2 trial, and it did show some moderate improvement in motor scores. So they're going to be looking at that a little bit further to figure out how beneficial it might be. The last 2 alpha-synuclein targets we are going to talk about include GBA and LRRK2. So these are the 2 most common genetic forms of Parkinson's disease. In GBA, the protein glucocerebrosidase is affected. This protein is important because it works in a part of the cell called the lysosome. And the lysosome is the garbage disposal, basically, of the cell. So it breaks down products within the cell before they get released, or prevents buildup of those toxic products within the cell that could ultimately lead to cell damage or cell death. With GBA mutations, if you have 2 mutated copies of this gene, you'll develop a condition called Gaucher's disease. And this is typically diagnosed in childhood. Gaucher's disease often affects the liver and spleen. It can cause bone trouble, bleeding trouble. And so the way to treat that is to have infusions to replace the glucocerebrosidase, or the protein or enzyme that's affected. With only one copy of the GBA mutation, people are at a slightly increased risk of developing Parkinson's. However, most people with one copy of that gene do not develop Parkinson's. But if you do, they're looking at different drugs that might help with the enzyme or protein dysfunction in order to improve symptoms and then possibly modify the disease. So Ambroxol is a medication used in Europe to treat respiratory illnesses. But what they found is that drug also increases the function of glucocerebrosidase within brain cells, and so could potentially help with progression of Parkinson's. Venglustat just failed phase 2. They announced that here earlier this year, but it was found to not show any benefit compared to placebo in patients who received that drug. LTI-291 is being looked at. It is shown to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier and potentially reduce accumulated products within the cell, but we still need more information from that study before it goes on any further to phase 3. PR001A is a trial that's being done right now to introduce normal GBA gene into the brain. And so we're still waiting on the results of that study. LRRK2 is another form of genetic Parkinson's. With this, it's autosomal dominant, meaning that you only need one copy of the gene in order to develop Parkinson's, but it shows reduced penetrance, which means that just because you have the gene doesn't necessarily mean that you'll develop Parkinson's. In fact, only 30% of people that have one copy of a mutated LRRK2 gene will develop Parkinson's. But what happens with this form of Parkinson's is that LRRK2 seems to regulate alpha-synuclein production as well as inflammation within the brain. And so by targeting that mutation, hopefully we'll be able to reduce alpha-synuclein and then also reduce inflammation. So the DNL151 and DNL201 are looking to inhibit alpha-synuclein aggregation as well as inflammation. And then B11B094 is a gene therapy. So going back to this slide here is looking at this step. So before the DNA, the mRNA gets converted into a protein. Those are being done now, so we don't have any results of those studies at this time. Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about stem cells. So I just wanted to be clear because I get asked this question a lot. There are currently no FDA-approved stem cell therapies for Parkinson's. And so there are a lot of people that come in talking about different stem cell treatments that they found. But the importance and the thing that I want to stress the most is that the FDA has not approved any stem cell therapy for Parkinson's. There have been several studies done so far looking at various types of stem cells and their benefit in if they're safe, if people tolerate it well, how practical is it, and then is there any benefit in symptom relief and or progression of the disease? And what we have found so far in accumulating all of that information from all of those types of studies is that younger patients with less advanced disease have the most potential for benefit. because you are delivering cells that may not be stem cells of your own body. It may require immunosuppression, and there are side effects and risks involved with that. And then the other key thing is, even after the stem cells have been implanted, improvement or benefit may take several years. So there's a task force that's been put together over the last couple of years to look more into stem cell therapy in the studies that have previously been done. And their goal is within the next couple of years to hopefully look into this more and start some more trials. It appears that Europe is going to be doing a few within the upcoming years. So there's still a lot to be learned about this, and I still think that we're probably several years away from knowing anything more about this. But it is also a potential for disease modification at some point. So lastly, we'll talk about what we're doing here at IU. So we unfortunately right now are not enrolling any patients for our studies, but there's a new one that's coming up that targeting alpha-synuclein antibody infusion, so the prasinezumab study that I talked about earlier. We're hoping to recruit 5 patients with early Parkinson's disease that can be on carbidopa-levodopa or MOA-B inhibitor like selegiline for this study. And so we'll be hopefully talking to some of you about participating in this in the near future. 2 studies that are being done currently are looking at a subcutaneous infusion of levodopa. And so this is delivery of levodopa under the skin continuously 24 hours a day to see how effective that is in symptom management, hopefully avoiding motor fluctuations. And then we're also looking at a new extended release form of carbidopa-levodopa. Where to learn more. So this was just a very brief overview of some of the big trials that are being done right now. We're still waiting on a lot of information from a lot of these trials. But to find out more, clinicaltrials.gov has a list of all of the clinical trials for Parkinson's disease. If you go to that website and search, you can look to see what all is being done. I do think that there is a lot of research, a lot of exciting things that are coming down the pipeline, and hopefully one day we'll be able to have some effective disease modifying therapies.
Well, a big thank you to Dr. Walls for that presentation. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Ashley Hildebrandt. Ashley is a board certified art therapist and art therapy supervisor at IU Health Neuroscience Center in Indianapolis. She has a wide range of experience in community, mental health, psychiatric, and medical settings. Ashley currently works with patients in the neurology and movement disorder clinics to help facilitate self-expression, develop healthy coping strategies to manage stress, increase social support, and improve quality of life. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Jessica. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Starting out today, I do have one disclosure to share. I'm the project lead of a new therapeutic arts program for people with Parkinson's that is funded by a Parkinson's Foundation community grant. I understand that a lot of you here today are not in Indiana, but I wanted to mention that due to limited space, all of our programming is going to be limited to people who are residents in the state. So a question I get a lot as an art therapist is, what are the expressive therapies? Especially in the Midwest, because there are not many expressive therapists. Expressive therapies is an umbrella term for healthcare professions that use the creative process to help improve and enhance psychological and social well-being. This includes different modalities like art therapy, dance movement therapy, music therapy, and then also drama therapy and poetry therapy. All of these are programs, usually master's level providers facilitate these services. First, we'll start with my modality, which is art therapy. Art therapy is a mental health profession in which we use the creative process to help facilitate self-expression and also help people develop healthy coping strategies to manage stress in their life. I found this illustration here that was done by an illustrator who's gone through art therapy for himself. And I think this really encapsulates what we do here. A lot of the times the things we think and feel are vague and abstract and can be hard to express. And once we're able to find a way to release that, it can really be a relief. Art therapy has been shown to have many benefits for people of all ages and life circumstances, but there's a growing body of research, especially for Parkinson's disease, that supports the benefits. First of all, art therapy has been shown to activate both sides of the brain. It can help us express ourselves in a way that might be difficult to express emotions, because so oftentimes the things that we think, feel, and experience are vague and abstract, and we might not really have the words for it. The creative process can, provide a really powerful outlet to express those things deep within ourselves, and can also help us find the words for what we're experiencing and communicate that with other people. Art can also be a great tool for those of us, who might be unable to verbally express themselves, especially those with aphasia. Art making can be a way of, again, expressing themselves, and something I've seen a lot in my work in the clinic is being able to share art with family members, and they'll have a better understanding of where a person is in that moment and provide better support for them. Art making has also been linked to stress reduction. There was a really fabulous study done about 4 or 5 years ago about the impact of art making on the brain. And it found that 45 minutes of art making, regardless of talent or skill level, significantly reduces the stress hormone cortisol in the brain. So again, it was a really big finding, and also helps explain why people find art making relaxing. Art making has also been shown to help improve mood and overall mental health. This is tied with the stress reduction and also the emotional communication and problem solving that occurs in the art therapy relationship. Self-confidence is something that we see a boost in quite a bit in our work, because as art therapists, we focus on what people can do rather than their limitations. And for many folks, this outlet provides a unique opportunity for people to function independently, doesn't have rules, and it doesn't require the assistance of other people. So people can really gain confidence in themselves, their skills, and their abilities. And it can also help promote a stronger sense of self. We're focusing on a person and their identity and who they are, rather than being a patient, which is something that a lot of people don't have many opportunities for. Art making has also been shown to promote neuroplasticity, and appears to target both cognition and motor skills, keeping in mind that repetition creates evolution in the brain. And this is something that we see across the creative arts therapies modalities as being true. Art therapy has also been shown to improve concentration and also provide an outlet for social interaction and an opportunity to connect with other people, which is so important, especially now with COVID isolation. Many art therapists are starting online group communities as a way of helping people connect. Group is really beneficial in fostering awareness that people are not alone in their experiences and emotions. And it's so powerful and so helpful. Art making has also been found to target motor symptoms. The dexterity involved in manipulating art media can help improve motor control in hands. Tremors can also be alleviated through art making because of the fact that tremors can be worsened by fatigue, stress, and emotional distress. So something that we notice is that as stress levels reduce, tremors reduce. And art making, of course, going back to the research, reduces cortisol in the brain, which helps reduce the tremors. Freezing has also been another motor symptom that can be improved with art therapy because art making introduces movements that are out of the norm, which causes the body to operate less on autopilot and reduces the freezing symptoms. There's also a growing body of research exploring the impact on art making on visuospatial dysfunction because the mechanisms in art making have been shown to enhance visuospatial functions, which can help improve things like gait and other motor symptoms. The next modality we're going to talk about is dance movement therapy. Dance movement therapy is a form of psychotherapy that uses all forms of movement to allow people to find more comfort in their bodies and to express themselves creatively. Again, much like art therapy, helping express things that might be difficult to put into words. Benefits of dance movement therapy: promotes balance and coordination, increases muscle tone and strength, improves gait and mobility. There's also some evidence that supports that DMT can help with digestive complications. And there's also been found a reduction in fatigue. Just as art therapy, many non-motor symptoms have been found to be alleviated with DMT, such as stress reduction. It encourages socialization and also improves self-confidence. So across the umbrella of creative arts therapies and expressive therapies, we tend to find a lot of similar overlap in terms of the benefit. Singing is also can be very important. Singing is considered to be exercise, and the act of singing can help people with their speech. It can help promote breathing, swallowing, improving those difficulties that oftentimes accompany Parkinson's. Singing also requires good posture, which can help with that. And there's also evidence that shows that it can also strengthen the immune system. All of these factors with motor symptoms and non-motor symptoms being improved through the creative arts therapies shows that these things can have a very big impact on quality of life. And that's the reason why we do what we do. And this is the big driver for our new program that we're doing, again, funded by the Parkinson's Foundation Community Grants. And it's a collaboration with the IU School of Medicine. Our new program is called Find Your Groove: Creative Approaches to Living with Parkinson's Disease. And this programming includes art therapy, dance movement therapy, and also a Parkinson's choir. We have a really fabulous team of art therapists. We have a dance movement therapist, speech language pathologist, along with a physical therapy doctoral student. We have a neurologist, a social worker. We're really a well-rounded group using our skills and strengths to help with these populations. We have 4 different group offerings. 2 of them are already full. The first is the Joy of Movement Dance group. The next is Art Techniques in Open Studio. Again, those are full, no longer available. But I will talk a little bit more about the ones that we do have space in. The first is the Find Your Groove Choir. It's a 12-week group that's on Sundays between 1 and 2 p.m. And the current series is already started, but we have another group with many openings beginning in early July. This does not require any talent, any experience with singing, but the one thing that might be helpful is having printer access for sheet music. If you don't have access to a printer, we'll be happy to mail you the music as well. The other area that we do have some room in is the community mural. We're doing a mural project where everyone will be painting panels in their own space of abstract paintings, And then they'll later be joined together to create a larger image. This is based on the work of painter Chuck Close, who adapted his art making due to a neurological condition to help him use his new skills and adaptations. And the way this is going to work, people again are going to have their own images and they'll later be joined. And we've gotten permission to have this permanently displayed at IU Health Neuroscience Center. The date for this is going to be on Fridays from 10 to noon. It's a 12-week group. This one also is expected to begin in July. We can have up to 25 participants, and I checked this morning and we have room for 10 more. So the first 10 who register will be able to join. For this group in particularly, we need to keep this open to Indianapolis residents because we have supplies free of charge for people to pick up. And since the paintings will be included in the mural, it will also require painting drop-off as well. If you're interested in these programs, feel free to register at findyourgroovepd.com. On the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see the sign up button. Click on that, put in your information, and you'll be good to go. For those of you who are out of the area, our Creative Arts Therapies team will also be facilitating some Wellness Wednesday events that are coming up later this year. We have one on July 14th and one on November 10th. To register for this, you can go to parkinsons.org. I have a link here below. I'm not sure if you're going to get the slides later, but I'd be happy to send that out over email later too. Other resources are the Parkinson's Foundation Helpline. They're a great resource for finding a Parkinson's trained art therapist, music therapist, dance therapist near you. And then also you can find resources on the professional websites for dance movement therapy, art therapy, music therapy to find other resources in your area. Thank you so much.
Ashley, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I just want to reiterate that we will be sharing all of this information in a follow-up email with today's attendees and registrants. So you will receive all of this. You will not miss it. So thank you. Thank you so much again. And also, I also want to remind people, if you have any questions after these presentations, please please put them in the bottom of the Q&A down there on the bottom of your screen. So just enter them into that Q&A portion, and we will try to get to them at the end during our Q&A session. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Zauber. Dr. Zauber is an associate professor of neurology at Indiana University School of Medicine and director of IU's Parkinson Foundation Center of Excellence. She spends her time caring for people with PD and other movement disorders. She is also involved in IU's Deep Brain Stimulation Program. She grew up in New Jersey and came to the Midwest for medical training. She attended Washington University School of Medicine, where she was also a neurology resident. She did her Movement Disorders Fellowship at Rush University in Chicago. In addition to leading the PD Center at IU, she is involved in clinical trials for new PD drugs, educating residents and fellows, and serves on the board of directors for Rocksteady Boxing International. Welcome, Dr. Zauber.
Good morning. Today, I'm going to talk about the gut and Parkinson's disease. And just as Dr. Walls was mentioning that some of her answers or presentation came from frequently asked questions that we get in the office, that the same is true for this talk. I don't have any disclosures that are relevant to this particular talk's content. And just to give you some perspective about where this topic sits in the big picture of things, gastrointestinal or GI symptoms fall under the broad umbrella that we call non-motor symptoms in Parkinson's. So this is to contrast non-motor symptoms with motor symptoms, which sometimes get more attention in Parkinson's, motor symptoms, of course, being slowness, stiffness, tremor, walking trouble. It's the motor symptoms that often lead people to a neurologist in the first place or help us make the diagnosis. But studies show that non-motor symptoms have as much, if not more, impact on somebody's quality of life in Parkinson's. And sometimes, because they're less visible to the outside observer, go undetected and untreated. So gastrointestinal symptoms fall under non-motor symptoms. You've already heard a little bit about mood symptoms. Cognitive symptoms are part of non-motor symptoms, as well as autonomic symptoms, such as changes in blood pressure, bladder control, sweating, temperature regulation. So my talk will first focus on what are some of the common gastrointestinal symptoms in Parkinson's, and then answer some questions about diet. Again, that's a frequently asked question that we get. And then the last part of my talk will be a little bit more about the science of how are the gut and brain connected. It seems like an unlikely combination, but many of you may have heard that there may be some connection in terms of how Parkinson's begins and our understanding of the mechanism. So we'll come to that towards the end. So constipation. This is something we often spend a lot of time talking about in the office. And I often ask patients about it, but never really define it, thinking that perhaps it's pretty clear to everyone if they're experiencing it, what it is. But the sort of technical definition of constipation is having less than 3 bowel movements per week or straining to have a bowel movement. And we know that constipation is very common in Parkinson's, but in many people, it may precede the diagnosis of Parkinson's. So studies have shown that in people who experience constipation earlier in their life, if you follow those people, they're more likely to get Parkinson's than someone who doesn't have constipation. Again, getting to that last topic of how are the gut and Parkinson's connected in terms of an underlying etiology. Constipation is common in Parkinson's because it's related to the underlying changes in the nervous system, but also because some of the medicines that we use to treat Parkinson's can cause constipation. Constipation is usually treatable. However, the treatment can require a number of different options. So the most common things we talk about are increasing fiber intake, which could be in the form of more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains, more or fiber supplements. Drinking more water is important for constipation. Exercise can help with constipation. And many people don't realize, but a medicine called Miralax, and that's the generic name, is, while it's very potent for treating constipation, is also very safe and can be used safely every day if needed. Another thing sometimes people don't realize is that it may take using all of these approaches simultaneously to get good control of constipation. Sometimes just one thing alone isn't enough. Then there's other over-the-counter options. Milk of magnesia, Sinha can be taken, although these medicines are usually best not used every day. Lactulose requires a prescription. There are other prescription medicines as well that can target constipation. Another common gastrointestinal symptom in Parkinson's is nausea and vomiting. One reason for that is a lot of the medicines that we use to treat the motor symptoms of Parkinson's have nausea as one of their most common side effects. Another reason why nausea and vomiting may be common in Parkinson's is because the transit through the GI tract is slowed in Parkinson's. That's true in the intestines, and that contributes to constipation, but the emptying of the stomach can also be slow, and that can contribute to nausea as well. It's important for people with Parkinson's to know that some of the most commonly prescribed nausea medicines should be avoided in Parkinson's because those medicines typically work directly against dopamine. And so they could temporarily worsen Parkinson's symptoms. There are meds, however, that are safe to use in Parkinson's. And ginger, which is of course over the counter, Tiogan and Zofran, which are brand name prescription medicines, are safe. And then sometimes if we don't have any benefit from those, we occasionally have to order a medicine from Canada that's not approved in the United States called domperidone, which can help with very severe nausea if needed. Jessica briefly mentioned the Aware and Care kit, which is available from Parkinson's Foundation, and I wanted to highlight it here since I mentioned that there are certain medicines that are commonly used that can make Parkinson's worse in regard to nausea, but the Aware and Care packet includes all kinds of information that is designed to give to a doctor who wasn't familiar with Parkinson's. So if somebody with Parkinson's has to have surgery and they want the anesthesiologist to know what medicines are safe or not safe in Parkinson's, or if someone had to be hospitalized, they can provide some of this information to the people taking care of them. This is free from the Parkinson's Foundation and something I'd recommend for everybody. Drooling is a common symptom in Parkinson's. In some people, it may be very severe. It's important to know that it's not that the body starts to make too much saliva. In most people, it's just simply that people are swallowing less frequently, and therefore there's more saliva in the mouth and it can escape. So one way to treat it that's fairly simple would be to have a candy in your mouth or gum, and that can help trigger more swallowing and then lessen drooling. There are a few medicines that are used to treat Parkinson's dementia, and they potentially could make drooling worse and actually potentially increase saliva production. There are medicines to treat drooling. However, they can have side effects. Many of the meds that are used to treat drooling can worsen constipation or worsen thinking. So sometimes if those meds aren't effective or tolerated, we will, and the drooling is very severe, we will do injections of myoblock, which is similar to Botox, into the salivary glands. And that's a fairly simple procedure to do. So a common question that I get from people with Parkinson's is, what is the best diet for somebody who has Parkinson's? And my typical answer has been a general healthy diet, lots of fruits and vegetables, because that's high in fiber and that can help with constipation, lots of fluids, as I mentioned, which helps constipation, but also can prevent low blood pressure from Parkinson's. And protein is okay, but that some people with Parkinson's need to pay attention to the timing of the protein intake in relationship to their meds, in particular in relationship to carbidopa, levodopa, also called Sinha. The reason for that is that the same transporter in the gut that transports the levodopa into the bloodstream is the same transporter that transports protein. So if somebody were to take their dose of levodopa at the same time they have a protein-heavy meal, that dose may not actually get absorbed into the bloodstream and may just pass on through. So the general advice, if someone's finding that they have certain doses in the day that don't seem to work well, is that they could pay attention and try and take the carbidopa levodopa medicine on an empty stomach, which would mean 30 minutes before they eat or an hour after they eat. Occasionally, if someone's very sensitive to protein, they may pay attention to the timing and put the protein later in the day. And some people don't have this problem at all and don't have to alter their diet in that way. In the past, people used to ask me, is there any particular diet that might slow the course of Parkinson's? And I would generally say no. However, there have been some recent studies that suggest a Mediterranean diet may be beneficial. A recent study showed that people who ate a Mediterranean diet were less likely to develop Parkinson's, and a Mediterranean diet has been shown in general to have less age-related problems such as cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, things like that. So I do think it's very reasonable if somebody wanted to change their diet to something in particular to consider a Mediterranean diet. What is a Mediterranean diet? Well, it's showing you here this pyramid where, interestingly, exercise and social interaction is part of the food pyramid. So some of the things we've been hearing about from our art therapist, and we'll hear about from Rocksteady Boxing, are actually considered part of a typical Mediterranean diet to interact with others and to move. But a Mediterranean diet focuses on eating fruits, vegetables, and whole grains as the main source of your food. And then to occasionally have fish as your protein source, occasionally poultry and dairy, and very infrequently meats and sweets. So this is where I'm going to switch gears and talk about the scientific side of things, and to try and answer this question as to, does Parkinson's begin in the intestine? And my answer is maybe. And I think it's a very interesting story. So over a decade ago, people started to notice that alpha-synuclein, which you heard about from Dr. Walls, which is the protein that misfolds in the intestines. Sorry, the alpha-synuclein is the protein that misfolds in the brain, in the brain cells in Parkinson's disease, can also be found in other areas of the body. And that isn't too surprising, but what was surprising was that they started to find alpha-synuclein in the intestinal biopsies of people who had undergone colonoscopies just for routine colon cancer screening. And the samples had been saved, and those were samples that had been removed even 10 or 20 years before the person had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, suggesting that perhaps alpha-synuclein was first abnormally folded in the intestines before it ever got to the brain. And so part of this story is going to involve the microbiome, which are the bacteria that live in our intestines, and the enteric nervous system. So enteric nervous system is a network of 50,000 neurons, so it's smaller than our nervous system in our brain and spine, but it sits between these layers of muscle that are around the intestine. So in the center, you can see the kind of the folds of the intestine, and then you can see these yellow neurons, and then the muscle. So also over the past 10 or more years, we've started to learn more about how Parkinson's spreads through the nervous system. And there's a neuropathologist named Helio Barak. And so this is called the Barak hypothesis, which is this idea that Parkinson's the pathological changes, which in this instance are designated by a Lewy body in this circle. So a Lewy body is a clump of alpha-synuclein. And what you can see here is that the first changes in the brain pathologically begin in the lower brainstem. So you can see on the left side, the dark purple. And then they start to spread in that middle picture to the upper brainstem. The purple is moving upward. And it's when those changes get to the upper brainstem is when the first motor symptoms of Parkinson's start to appear, because that's where we get to the substantia nigra, which is where those dopamine producing cells sit. And in the last slide, you can see that over time, the Lewy bodies start to spread into the thinking parts of the brain, and that's where people begin to have more cognitive changes. So the pathological changes in Parkinson's, we know, are spreading across the nervous system, and we think that they may begin in the lower brainstem, which is where the vagus nerve enters. And so if you look at this cartoon on the right side of your screen, you see this bright yellow nerve called the vagus nerve. And it's called the vagus, which comes with a similar root as vagabond or wanderer, because it's a very long nerve. It goes from the lower brainstem down all the way to the intestines and also stops along the way at the heart. And so this is a nerve that helps to connect these organs of your body to your brainstem. And what some studies in the past 5 to 10 years have shown is that if patients have their vagus nerve cut, they are less likely to develop Parkinson's. Why would they have their vagus nerve cut? Well, many years ago, before drugs like proton pump inhibitors like Prilosec and Prevacid were around, cutting the vagus nerve was a treatment that was used for people with gastric ulcers. I don't think it's done very commonly anymore, but studies have shown that in people where they've had that surgery done, they're less likely than the general population to develop Parkinson's. And so that started to lead people to question, is it possible that something's happening in the intestine? Alpha-synuclein is starting to misfold and then spreading through the vagus nerve up into the lower brainstem and later into the brain. And this is a current hypothesis. There's a lot of data suggesting this, but it's still mostly a hypothesis. So what might cause Parkinson's to begin in the intestines if it does? And that leads us into this discussion of the microbiome. So you may have heard about this. It's getting a lot of press. The microbiome refers to all the bacteria that live in your intestine. We also have bacteria living on our skin, and there are more bacteria on our body than there are our own cells. However, the bacteria that live on our skin or in our intestines are very small, and so they only probably make up around 2 to 3 pounds, even though the numbers of cells are very high. Where does this come from? Well, in our GI tract, we get these bacteria in part when we're born, as we pass through the birth canal, and then it's influenced by things that are in our environment and by our diet. What is it doing there? Well, that's interesting because for a long time, scientists and physicians really ignored the bacteria that lived in our intestine, except for the ones that we knew caused diseases. We didn't really pay any attention to what they were doing there unless they were making somebody sick. We know that they help to form certain vitamins and that they regulate the immune system. And studies are showing us that some bacteria may be more pro-inflammatory and some may be more anti-inflammatory. And the type of bacteria that live in our intestines don't just potentially influence our risk of Parkinson's disease, but may influence our risk of other chronic diseases, like rheumatoid arthritis and many others. So here is a cartoon trying to illustrate what I've just described. So if you look in the middle, you can see a cartoon of these different types of bacteria. And what's being illustrated here is that the type of bacteria that are in this person's intestine are leading to inflammation. That inflammation is then causing these kind of peach-colored intestinal cells to be disrupted. So the intestinal cells are there to absorb things from the intestine, but also to serve as a barrier to keep things out. And these cells that are looking gray are no longer doing a good job of keeping things out. So then it says leaky gut, right? So things are now getting in that maybe shouldn't get in. They're starting to get into that nervous system, the enteric nervous system, which you can see in yellow. And then you can see this little, looks like a crumpled up piece of paper, or the slide that Ashley showed you of the person with a lot of thoughts in their head. In this case, it's representing the misfolded alpha-synuclein proteins. And now those are starting to spread into the vagus nerve, this big yellow nerve, and up into the brain. So there are other types of other connections between the Parkinson's and the intestine. One is studies have shown that people who have inflammatory bowel disease, which is ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, have an increased risk of Parkinson's. I had noticed this in my patients that, in particular, it seemed younger onset patients with Parkinson's seem to have, a lot of them seem to have a diagnosis of Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. And at one point, and that was before, and then at some point that study was done and has confirmed that indeed this is the case. And it might make sense if you are following this discussion here, that if somebody has inflammatory bowel disease, that is going to affect how things get absorbed into the intestines, perhaps allow toxins to enter and start the whole cascade that leads to Parkinson's. However, interestingly, it may not just be the inflammation in the intestine per se, because a gene called LRRK2, which is one of the two genes you probably hear a lot about, GBA and LRRK2. LRRK2 has been linked to Crohn's disease. So perhaps the connection between inflammatory bowel disease in some people is just simply a shared genetic risk, and not that the inflammatory bowel disease has affected the intestines and then allowed Parkinson's to begin. In the last few minutes here, I did want to talk a little bit about the environmental influences in Parkinson's. We know in general that Parkinson's in most people, we think, is caused because of a combination of some inherited predisposition and then some environmental influences. The most common environmental influences are that have been well studied and well described are pesticides. And there are other environmental things that have been shown perhaps to be beneficial, like drinking coffee, smoking. Of course, we don't advocate smoking. Some people argue that perhaps the reason that drinking coffee or smoking in some ways seems to reduce the risk of Parkinson's is perhaps through its impact on the microbiome, such that people who drink coffee or smoke may have more anti-inflammatory bacteria. That's again a hypothesis. But I did want to talk a little bit about the influence of environmental exposures in Parkinson's, because there is now a movement within the Parkinson's community to do more advocacy in terms of talking to leaders at the national level and raising awareness of Parkinson's, because some of the pesticides that are still used very commonly in this country have been shown to cause Parkinson's disease. And I feel strongly and would encourage others to look into this advocacy work. This week in particular, an organization is sending letters to the White House to say, we need to raise more awareness, more funding for Parkinson's, but also we need to start to ban chemicals like paraquat, which are pesticides that we know can cause Parkinson's. So the people that are organizing this effort use the analogy of other diseases like breast cancer or AIDS, where patient organizations did a lot to lobby Congress, lobby the government for more research and and more support, and that maybe in the Parkinson's community, we haven't done as good a job of making noise and saying, look, here are some things that we can do. So frequently asked questions in regard to the gut and Parkinson's. Number one, should people with Parkinson's disease take probiotics? Well, some people with Parkinson's do take probiotics to treat constipation, and for some people they find that that's helpful. If the question is, will taking probiotics help slow the course of the disease? I don't think we know for sure. And I think it's probably unlikely, because if we say that the type of bacteria that live in the intestine influence developing Parkinson's, we know that that's happening decades before the first Parkinson's symptoms occur. And so will influencing the gut microbiome once someone has Parkinson's influence what's happening in the brain? We don't know. And as of now, there's a lot of conflicting data as to which bacteria are overrepresented in the intestines of people with Parkinson's. So there's some consensus that's starting to take hold, but many of the studies show different results. And so right now, it's very difficult to know what is the right kind of bacteria to take, even if we believe that it would help. So in other words, my recommendation would be taking probiotics is reasonable to alleviate constipation, but it's premature to say that there's any type of manipulation of gut bacteria, aside from kind of the healthy diet recommendations that I made, to slow the course of Parkinson's. Second question is, does all Parkinson's begin in the gut? And I think the answer is probably not. In fact, there was a recent publication in the past year or so where scientists looked at people with Parkinson's and saw that there was a percentage of people where Parkinson's began in the periphery of the body, either with this loss of sense of smell in the nose, or with constipation or other GI symptoms. But then there were people who never experienced those types of symptoms. Again, highlighting this idea that Parkinson's is not one disease. It's most likely multiple diseases that we simply lump together. And so while this hypothesis that I was describing about Parkinson's beginning in the intestine may be the case for many people, it's unlikely to be the case for all people with Parkinson's.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zauber, for all of that great information. I know people are especially interested in the PD and gut connection, so thank you for that. So everyone, now we will be moving on to our interactive movement break, which is really exciting because we are going to be having Rock Steady Boxing joining us. So just as a quick reminder, don't forget to submit the questions throughout today's webinar by clicking again on that Q&A icon located in the black banner on the bottom of your screen. So now we'd like you to join us for a 10-minute movement break led by the awesome Rock Steady Boxing crew. So get up and stretch your legs and feel free to participate only if you feel safe to do so from home. So welcome, Christy and Chris.
Thank you. Are you going to spotlight our video?
You guys are perfect right now.
All right, cool.
Hello, everybody. We are so privileged to be a part of this amazing team, Dr. Zauber, all of the different modalities that we talk about for exercise. We want to get you up and moving, but we also want to make sure that we appeal to all levels of functioning. So I'm going to remain in a chair, and Christy is going to demonstrate the standing progressed exercises. So we want to make sure that you're safe, make sure that you have a sturdy chair if you are going to sit, and that you have space to move.
Yep, and I have my boxing gloves on just for effect. You don't have to have boxing gloves on, but
it's kind of nice.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the benefits of movement and get breathing a little bit. So hopefully everybody can join us. Care partners, boxers, everybody involved. All right, coach.
So the fundamentals of rock steady boxing, of course, boxing is always kind of the hook that gets people's attention, but rock steady boxing is based on some very foundational components that are very relevant to Parkinson's disease. And the rock steady method was designed to combat the specific symptoms of Parkinson's. So it just so happens that the things that a boxer does help with Parkinson's symptoms. So the very first thing that we want to establish is a nice wide foundation, a confident, upright posture, like you're ready to start the fight. You're ready to tackle this thing. So she's going to stand in a nice wide stance and get a wide platform like a pyramid.
So, and you can't see my feet right now, it's limited on our space, but what you basically want to do is start with your feet shoulder width apart. All right, and then you're gonna step back with your dominant side. So for me, I'm a right-handed, so I'm gonna step back with my right foot. If you're left-handed, you're gonna step back with your left foot. All right, but you don't wanna stack your feet so that they're in a straight line. You want them to be spread out so that there's a square around your foundation.
The camera down real quick
There
so
you
you
go.
can see her feet.
Yep.
Yep, nice and wide.
So nice wide square foundation.
And also in a chair, I'm gonna do the very same thing. I'm gonna get nice and upright with my posture. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but right now we're gonna focus on the feet, placement of the feet, nice and wide.
All right, the other thing we want to do is we want to kind of relax our legs a little bit. So we don't want to be straight. We don't want those knees to be locked out. We want those legs to be kind of fluid. And even if you're in a chair, let's just start moving back and forth a little bit up on the balls of your feet and feel that foundation, feel that solid platform for balance. And we call this boxing stance, but this is actually something that you can use. Say you're at a grocery store. I like to use a grocery store analogy because grocery stores have been crazy lately. And there's a lot of people swirling around and you may feel a little bit unstable. Go ahead and get into a little bit of a boxing stance because that's going to give you the foundation that you need for proper balance.
So moving up the chain, the body, we're going to start with a wide platform from the feet up, relax the knees a little bit, engage the muscles of the legs, and then we're going to move into the core. So a boxer has to have a tight core in order to withstand punches, but we're not going to throw punches or receive punches, but as a boxer would do, we are going to engage the core muscles. So tighten those core muscles and just kind of relax the upper body, and we're going to tuck those shoulder blades back and in, and then we're going to just bend the arms so you're nice and upright. The eyes are straight ahead, not down, and we're getting ready to face our opponent.
Yeah, our opponent today is Parkinson's disease. All right, so we're going to start with, we're going to just do a couple of basic punches, guys. But the first thing you need to know is from your boxing stance, whatever punch that you're executing, you need to engage your expiratory strength by breathing out forcefully, which is going to cause you to breathe back in. So the first one we're going to start with is the jab. That's your one. And that's going to be the lead arm. So in my case, it's the left hand. So what we're going to do when we throw it out, we're going to turn our body and engage the shoulder, bring the arm, and the hand is going to be palm down, and then bring it all the way back. So don't worry about footwork. We're not going to move our feet right now because we know you guys are probably in a living room, in a kitchen. So we're going to just stand in one spot. When you throw your jab, we want to breathe out. And when you bring the hand back in, you're breathing back in. So here we go. I'm going to explain the jab while I throw it, and you guys try to mirror what I'm doing.
So the jab starts here. You're going to have your elbows like they're on a shelf, right on your chest. They're going to be right on your chest, ready to punch. As it comes out, watch my fist. It comes out, the palm is down, and then we're going to twist and push as far as you're able. Now, this is not only an effective way to punch, this is a forward reach. And the functional reasons behind forward reach, again, let's go back to the grocery store, or you're in your kitchen and you want to be able to maintain that forward reach while establishing a wide base of support so we don't fall forward.
So we're going to go into what's called the cross or the two now, and it's going to be with your dominant hand. So the first thing that happens is you're going to push your hip forward and you're going to push with your leg the last thing that happens, boom, is the arm comes through. And again, that forward lean is really important.
She's kind of scary.
Parkinson's disease, you know, we tend to have these smaller movements, right? There's a lot of kyphotic posture and everything gets little. With boxing, everything is big and it's explosive and it's all your body, it's all your body's movement to get as long as you can. All right. So the cross should be your dominant hand. The other thing I want you to notice is if you look at my shirt, all right, I'm facing the camera right now, but when I throw my punches, either one, my jab, notice my shirt's facing that direction, my cross on that direction. So we just twisted our body 180 degrees.
And rotation is also affected by folks with Parkinson's disease. It's difficult to rotate when you're not confident in your balance. And we also have a symptom of rigidity. So we're trying to break through those symptoms through these boxing movements. Another symptom that we really want to target that is a non-motor symptom is respiratory health. The shallow breathing can be a very dangerous thing for people with Parkinson's. So you want to listen for that breath, those auditory cues. I want to hear your breath, Rose.
All right.
Nice.
Breathing out hard. All right, let's throw a couple more combinations in here, and then we're going to take about a minute and just do what we call shadow boxing. So we got our 1, 2. Now let's throw a hook. So a hook is across the body. All right, so again, watch the front of my shirt, my zipper's facing you. When I throw a hook, my zipper's facing out to the side, out to the other side. All right, palms are down. This is actually a really tight punch.
It's really scary.
Are you scared?
I am.
You're a little bit scared?
Like you're going to hit
So
me
we
in the
don't
head.
want to be wild when we throw this. We want to engage the core muscles, the posterior muscles when we throw our hook. And you can't really see my feet right now, but my heels are coming up off the ground. That's your hook. Now we're going to go into the uppercut, which starts from the front of the body. We're going to bend down. We're going to put our weight. If I'm throwing my right hand uppercut, I'm going to put my weight on my right leg.
Let me hear you breathe,
press
Rose.
up.
Let me hear you breathe.
If I go with my left,
there it is.
Pressing up from the left leg, left uppercut, right uppercut.
And then she's going to put her arms, when she's done with those punches, she's going to put her arms back on the shelf that we talked about, tuck those shoulder blades back in, tighten the core, get ready for your next combination.
And guys, one of the reasons that we have to keep those hands up is because well, first of all, you want to have good defense, but when the hands are down here, that creates a weight shift, a weight problem that's going to pull your posture down. So the hands get heavy. So we want to bring them up, bring the shoulders back. So here we go. Follow me. We're going to go 1, 2, hook, hook, uppercut, uppercut. Woo! Again, 1, 2, hook, hook, uppercut, uppercut. Let's throw 10 jabs. Jab. 3,
Breathe
4,
out, breathe out.
6, 7.
So you
8,
can see that she's
9,
shifting
10.
her weight on her legs if you're comfortable.
10 right
doing
hands
that.
or 10 cross. 2.
You got about a minute and a half left, Rose. You got a minute and a half to go. Nice job. Nice job.
Now we're going to roll the body. Okay, so this is some defensive tactics, and you're using your core, shifting your weight from left to right. I want you to roll like there's a rope right here next to my head. I'm going to roll underneath it. There it is. So we're going to throw a 1, 2, roll, 2, 1, roll, 1, 2, roll, 2, 1, roll. We're going to go uppercut, uppercut, roll, uppercut, uppercut, roll. All right, and then we're going to go, since we got about a minute left, give me 30 seconds of non-stop punching.
Don't
Are you
forget
ready?
to breathe. Here we
go.
go.
And rolling. All right, here we go. Keep it up. We got about 15 more seconds, guys. All right, we're going to end it with 10 seconds of nothing but 1, 2s. Here we go. Breathe out every other punch. 5 seconds. And time. Let's take 30 seconds.
Ding, ding, ding.
To breathe. We're going to
Let's
calm
reach up.
the heart rate down. Yep.
Out and down. Maintain that upright posture that we talk about. That's so important.
We're going to
to
twist
combat
the body.
that kyphotic posture.
Okay, pull the heels up when you twist.
You got 15 seconds left, Rose.
Yeah.
Good job, everybody.
Hey, I broke a sweat a little bit. Let's roll those shoulders.
Good way to start the weekend. Get up and moving.
All right, and then if you have room, let's take the arms across the body and back as far as they can go, squeezing the shoulder blades together.
You're gonna bring it
Going
in.
up, hold on. Oh, hold on. And we're gonna breathe in one time.
Big smile on your face. That
And-
feels great. At the end of every single workout at Rocksteady Boxing, we have something called Bring It In. And you guys need to repeat after us.
Here we go. Repeat after me.
Repeat after her.
I scream.
I scream.
You scream.
You scream.
We all scream.
We all scream.
For dopamine.
For dopamine.
Yeah. Rocksteady. Thanks, guys.
Man, you two are great. Thank you so much. And guys, if you're ever in the Indianapolis area and you need comic relief, Christy and Chris will also give you that along with a wonderful workout. So thank you so much to Rocksteady Boxing for that great movement break. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker, Dr. Shilpee Sinha. Dr. Sinha is the service line lead for the IU Health Palliative Care Services at the Adult Academic Health Center. After completing a residency in internal medicine and a fellowship in hospice and palliative care on the East Coast, she joined the IU system in 2006. Dr. Sinha has been part of the IU palliative care team since it was established in 2011. During her years in service, she has been integrally involved in clinical and administrative efforts to build a strong footprint of palliative care across the spectrum of the academic center in the Indy suburban region, with the most recent expansion to home-based and virtual services. She is a co-founder of the Indiana Network for Hospice and Palliative Care, a statewide collaborative, which was launched in 2020. Her passion is caring for patients with serious illness and helping advance palliative care both at a specialty level and at a primary level. Welcome, Dr. Sinha.
Thank you, Jessica, for this introduction, and hopefully the audio is coming through all right.
It sounds great.
Okay, great. So I also want to just say thank you to the participants, and I'm going to start my presentation today with a quotation by Isaac Asimov. He is believed to have quoted that life is pleasant, death is peaceful. It's the transition that's troublesome. And I feel like this quotation perfectly encapsulates what life is really about. In medicine, and especially in palliative care, I think this is what our goal and our hope is that as patients are navigating through a chronic serious illness, how can we provide them with good quality and good options for care so that this transition eventually becomes less troublesome? And just as context, this photograph was taken by my iPhone at 13,000 feet elevation in the Himalayan range. And these are Pashmina goats that you see, the cashmere sweaters that we wear, they come from the wool of these. So it's very easy to get philosophical when you're surrounded by beauty like that. So my hope today is that I can educate people about what palliative care really is, as the very name sometimes can be fearful for people. They equate the word palliative care to end of life, and it really isn't. Though, of course, experts in palliative care are also very well trained to treat patients at their end of life. That is not at all what palliative care is all about. So the Center for Advancement of Palliative Care defines it as specialized medical care for people who are living with serious illness. So there's special emphasis on the living. And the focus is on providing relief from the symptoms and stress of a serious illness. And the goal is to improve quality of life for the patient as well as the family. So this is a very key component in how we practice palliative care. We acknowledge that though a disease physically and directly may affect a patient, the family as a unit is also part of that journey. And as caregivers, as loved ones, everybody is affected by anyone who is going through a chronic serious illness and its progression. The two specialty advantages that a palliative care team and a specialist can bring is enhanced communication, clarification of goals of care, and then symptom management. I also just mentioned that we are a team. So we work as an interdisciplinary team, which doesn't always have all of its members present, but we are fortunate at IU Health that we have a very strong presence with a physician, advanced care providers, a nurse, medical social worker, as well as a chaplain, because we believe in the fact that physical health and social health and psychosocial health, along with spiritual health, all of it impacts somebody's well-being. A little bit about the history. How did palliative care come into being as a specialty? It really started, the modern movement started more with the hospice movement. And I'll talk a little bit about the differences between hospice and palliative care shortly, but this is a picture of Dame Cicely Saunders, who's a really remarkable lady. She is someone who actually started her career as a social worker, and while taking care of a patient who was dying of cancer, was so deeply influenced that she decided that she wanted to devote her career to that aspect of care. And then she went on to attend medical school. And then really her focus was improving the care of dying, which she felt was a very neglected group. Her belief, rather than saying there's nothing more that can be done, was that there is so much more to be done. And she actually founded the very first formal hospice home at St. Christopher's Hospice in London, all the way back in 1967. Before that, historically, if you look, there are reports of some scattered hospices and excellent nursing and spiritual care being provided, but not very much medical input, because the ideology really was that, there's nothing more that can be done, and therefore, it doesn't need any medical attention at that phase of someone's life. How did this then expand and come into being in the modern palliative care movement? So this picture is of Dr. Balfour Mount. He was a urological surgeon in Canada, and he encountered a lot of patients who presented with advanced urological cancers, and he was simultaneously reading Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on death and dying, very influenced by that, had heard about Dame Cicely Saunders' work and St. Christopher's Hospice, so made a trip down to London just to visit and understand how and what was being done over there for patients. Was very influenced by that, brought it back to his own hospital. And then he recognized that why should we limit that philosophy of care just for dying patients? Because a lot of what was being done can be incorporated earlier in a disease trajectory of a serious and progressive illness. And that's really how the concept of palliative care was founded. He is, in fact, credited with coining the term palliative. It's actually got a very beautiful origin. It comes from the word pallium, which has got a Latin root. And pallium means cloak. So his concept was that in palliative care, you cloak the symptoms, burdensome symptoms of any illness, and provide comfort. This graph, it looks a little busy, but it's actually a very well depicted graphic of how does palliative care fit into the disease trajectory of a patient. So if you look towards the left-hand side, at the onset of diagnosis, so when somebody is diagnosed, and since this is about Parkinson's disease, if we were to use that as the example, at the time of diagnosis, you heard earlier in some of the talks that treatments and therapies are all directed towards either relief from symptoms or from disease-modifying treatments. And really, they are looking at either curative intent treatments or minimizing the progression of the disease. So alongside with that, there is also the need to alleviate distress and alleviate symptomatic kind of benefits of that. So if you were to look at the disease modifying treatments and the curative intent treatments, they have much more impact in the earlier stages of any progressive disease. As the disease progresses, the role for those treatments and the therapeutic window that it provides starts narrowing. But the burden of symptoms does increase, and the role for palliation starts becoming more important. So hand in hand, curative intent treatments, as well as disease modifying treatments, as well as palliation, right from the onset of disease. That is the concept they are propagating. Who delivers that palliation? It does not have to be a specialist. A lot of our primary care physicians, a lot of our neurologists and other specialists are adept, and they have team members within their own clinic space or hospital staff to provide that palliative support. And that talks about the concept of primary palliative care versus specialist palliative care. So primary palliative care is what every clinician can incorporate some of these tools into their own practice. And specialist level palliative care is if the need so arises and there is not enough time sometimes in addressing all the facets that go along with that palliation, you can then approach a specialist team, an interdisciplinary team that might have the ability or the training to do the other piece. If you take a look at this, at the 6-month prognosis mark, people become eligible for hospice benefits. So just to touch on that a little bit, hospice is a Medicare Advantage that was created for patients who are deemed to have a prognosis of 6 months or less. That's one criteria. And the second criteria is the patient or their legal surrogate decision maker are at a space where they are accepting that they do not wish for aggressive treatments, but rather wish to focus on comfort. So those are the two main criteria for hospice eligibility. The other interesting thing in this model is that care does not stop at death. Because as I said, any patient with a chronic progressive illness has a unit of loved ones, and they leave behind those loved ones who then require bereavement services. And that is a very big philosophy within both palliative care and hospice, that that bereavement aspect is an important piece of anybody's care. So if I was to say what is the difference between hospice and palliative care is like a huge umbrella that starts at the onset of a person's chronic serious illness. And hospice care is a specialized subset benefit for a patient who is at the last 6 months of their life, as well as who is ready to accept a more comfort-based approach. And again, the philosophy really is patient-centered care. You may have heard about this terminology, but we strongly advocate that sometimes while we are going through procedures and investigations, we are very focused on treating what the disease is about, getting test results, getting surgeries done. And somewhere along the way, the patient may get lost because there is so much going on and so many reports and results to focus on that we forget to check in on what is the patient's goals? What do they want from this treatment? What are they trying to achieve? So respect is very important. And we have to acknowledge that each patient brings with them their own value system, which may be based off of their family experience, their cultural, spiritual, religious beliefs. And that is a definite part of what we incorporate within practicing palliative care. So I had mentioned right in the beginning that the two big things that we address within palliative care are symptom management, and the other is goals of care discussion. So I know that Dr. Zauber had actually talked at depth about some of the symptoms that are addressed. And that's excellent because that is a classic example of primary palliative care that is being incorporated in the Parkinson's Center of Excellence, that these things are being addressed alongside with the actual disease modifying therapies, etc. So looking at this, what are the universal symptoms that anyone experiences with any chronic disease, not just Parkinson's? It's pain. It could be fatigue, nausea, diarrhea, constipation, loss of appetite, shortness of breath, and of course, anxiety, depression, well-being. So we have a routine structure where patients are screened for these particular symptoms, and then managing those symptoms, of course, in collaboration with primary doctors, with specialists. That is a key component of what we do in palliative care. Especially in this day and age, one of the things that is needing special attention is the use of controlled substance and the appropriate use of controlled substance. That is another specialty advantage that the palliative care team brings. Going more in depth into the concept of how these symptoms are alleviated, this slide actually is an excellent example. And even though it talks about total pain, I would replace that with any other symptom, because what we learned and what Dame Cicely Saunders had initially talked about was that a symptom is not always a physical symptom manifestation of the disease. Sometimes there are psychological components to it, there's a spiritual component to it, there's a social component to it. So if you were to take pain, for example, not only do we need to talk about how do we address it with medications, we also have to find out what is the patient's state of mind and well-being, because it is a well-known, well-studied fact that extraneous influences can actually exacerbate physical pain. For example, if somebody is anxious and depressed or has a lot of anger from even the disease that they are dealing with and their grief process of dealing with that disease, that can lead to more pain. There's sometimes a lot of fear of suffering that people keep bottled in within themselves that they don't want to talk about. They may have had friends or family members they have observed who have had this illness, and they have their own fears coming from that. And of course, as the disease progresses, sometimes patients suffer with grief of loss of independence. That is a very big factor within a well-being. And other than that, if you also talk to patients, they will mention to you that the spiritual aspect of things are also what burdens them and exacerbates their physical symptoms. Many patients talk about the loss of meaning in life, the loss of faith. They feel, why me? Why am I dealing with this? I did everything correctly in my life and have led a good life, yet I am suffering from a disease that has no explanation for it. There are many things that patients have shared about fear of what the higher power might be. This in turn causes them a lot of physical pain. And that pain cannot be treated by the use of even opioids, let's say. That pain really comes from careful counseling, listening, being able to express and share your feelings. And that's where the interdisciplinary team really comes in. And then, of course, pain that comes from strain within relationships, legal and financial concerns, the fear of being a burden to caregivers, all of that also impacts a person's health. So it's important to address these, it's important to talk about them and allow patients to have an avenue to discuss this either through counseling or through chaplaincy or social work support even. Moving on to the second part of what we do in palliative care is advanced care planning. So advanced care planning is actually a very, very important piece of what palliative care teams are skilled at doing through careful communication and again, use of our interdisciplinary team approach. So what really is it? The definition is it's making decisions about the care you want to receive if you became unable to speak for yourself. And of course, this is going to be based on your personal values. So it's patient-centered care really, preferences, discussions with your loved ones, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. So it's not something that you can just share with a group of people with the same stage of a disease and expect the same result from, because this is a very individualized kind of process. It's very important because oftentimes we tend not to talk about what our care preferences are, thinking that we'll cross that bridge when it comes. However, unfortunately, what happens is that in a crisis moment, oftentimes people lose the capacity to talk for themselves. And because this was never discussed amongst loved ones, the family as well as the care team is left guessing what would be the right next value-based step to take. And that can be very difficult on patients as well as on their families. It's also important to recognize that it's a journey, and it changes with the passage of time and the progression of a serious illness. What somebody might accept for their care in the early stages of their life may not be the same that they will accept at a later stage of their disease. So it's very important to address this periodically. And then appointing a surrogate decision maker to help uphold your wishes if you lose capacity is another important element of an advanced care plan. How did it come about? So in 1991, based off of a lot of very prominent ethical cases, Patient Self-Determination Act was passed, because up until then, patients really did not have a voice or a say in what treatments they were given and not given. So it was really done with the intent that now patients have a voice and they have autonomy to talk about what is right for them. This Patient Self-Determination Act that was passed is a federal law, and really what it does is it informs institutions and requires institutions to provide at the time of admission a written summary of information that each state has its own version of. So this is also important to recognize that we in Indiana have our advanced directives, but states in Illinois and Wisconsin, there might be some slight nuances between each state. So it's very important to know about the advanced directive laws within your own state and make sure that your documents are updated accordingly. And really the act was designed so that people can educate everyone to have this prepared if they so want. It's also important that nobody can force you to do this if you're not ready for it. This shows that there are stages in advanced care planning. So if you look at it, the first steps are even healthy adults. If any of you have ever gone to a lawyer's office and done a living will, part of that is actually, or a financial will, part of that is a living will. And they actually ask you questions like, would you want to be put on life support, or questions on artificial nutrition. So even healthy adults actually have some form of an advanced care plan. And then as a patient may age or their disease may progress, these have to be more modified and more focused on what are those specific questions that are pertinent. Each state has its own document, like I said, and one document that we use in our state is a healthcare representative form. So this is one piece of an advanced care plan, which I spoke of, is naming a legal surrogate. Naming a healthcare representative is so important because I've seen multitudes of patients who may lose capacity in an acute hospitalization, and they have very many loving family members present, but no one person identified as who will be the person to actually help reflect the patient's own wishes. Sometimes the most close person is not emotionally capable, or the person who is the legal surrogate by law may not be the person the patient wants. And that is so important to address. And I'll give an example over here for Indiana consent law. if you don't have a designated surrogate, this is the order by which the state would allow someone to make decisions for you. So it's a spouse, or then it's an adult child, then a parent, then an adult sibling, then the grandparent, grandchild, nearest other relative, so on and so forth. There are many occasions I have seen where the person by law is simply not able to do that role because they have never had that conversation with the patient. They have never actually talked about these difficult decisions, and they're not ready to talk about whether a patient would want, let's say, resuscitation or vent support or an artificial nutrition tube. So that's why naming the healthcare representative while you still can and having those difficult conversations with them are essential elements of preparing your advanced care plan. This is Indiana's advanced directive. It's called a post form. And this website has got a lot of good information that you can take a look at. I would encourage people to go onto this website. There's a 10-minute video that educates you on what its content is. And actually the post form is a form that is a modified version of a national POLST paradigm document that almost every state in the US has a version of. This just happens to be Indiana's. Most of them are very similar in language and have passed through a series of legal as well as medical reviews to make sure that the verbiage is reflecting the appropriate content. So this is a good resource to access. I think, as I mentioned, an advanced care plan, it's never too early to start talking about this, and it should not be done in a crisis, because in a crisis, emotions are very high, and that is very hard on families as well as patients on making difficult decisions at that time. So this website also has a list of frequently asked questions that you can review. If I had to give a very small snapshot of how complicated navigating medical care is, these two pictures side by side can actually highlight that. The one on the left is a painting of Raphael on his deathbed and shows all the people who adored him, surrounding him and kind of praying for him. This is how medical care was so scarce in the era of, the late 1700s and all. But where has modern medicine taken us at this stage? Modern medicine now has equipment and treatments that can support organ systems. We have dialysis machines, we have ventilators, we have a machine for everything. And it's wonderful because we actually have the ability now to treat and cure patients. At the same time, not all those treatments are appropriate at every stage in life. And that's why it's so important for us to talk about, what is right for us, because we don't want this to not be part and parcel of what patients want for themselves. Whatever care we offer should be in accordance with what patients want, and it should be according to their values. And that really is the crux of all of this discussion around advanced care planning, is know what is right for you, know what will give you better quality of life, and talk about it. Don't be fearful of talking about it, and ask your physicians to help you. In this slide, Charlie Brown says, "We only live once, Snoopy." And then Snoopy says, "Wrong, we only die once, we live every day." So we want that life to be full of vibrance and quality. And that really is a hallmark of what every health system should be able to do. There should be quality in life and quality in death. And that's what really makes a successful health system. So with that thought, I'll end my presentation. And if there are questions, I can answer them at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinha. That was a great presentation and such an important topic that I definitely learned more about at this point. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm going to just try and get rid of this screen sharing. Has it already been successfully discontinued?
You know what?
Yes.
Danielle will, oh, perfect. Yes. So we are, and then we will bring you guys all back in just a moment here. So, and now we will begin our Q&A segment. But first, I would like to welcome Hillary Newest and Ryan Nayenhaus. Hillary graduated from Indiana University with her doctorate in physical therapy in 2015. She works at IU Health's Neurorehabilitation and Robotics Clinic, where she treats patients with Parkinson's disease and other neurological impairments. She is passionate about providing skilled, compassionate care to her patients, helping improve their mobility and function. Ryan is an occupational therapist, also working at IU Health's Neurorehabilitation and Robotics Clinic. He splits his time between outpatient services, working in the ALS Multidisciplinary Clinic and Wheelchair Clinic. He is a member of the Parkinson Foundation Center of Excellence Multidisciplinary Team. We welcome both of you to the panel as well, in addition to our previous speakers. So thank you so much, everyone. I will be directing questions toward all of you now. When I ask you a question, just unmute yourself. And again, if someone answers a question and another presenter wants to answer the same question, please feel free to do so and just jump in afterward. So Dr. Zauber, what can be done about breakthrough tremors when carbidopa-levodopa does not work for me?
Good question. So today we haven't talked a lot about the motor symptoms of Parkinson's, but tremor, of course, is a common one. And sometimes tremor does, as you say, break through, meaning under stress or excitement, tremor may become more notable. And so I think it might depend on, in this instance, if it's breakthrough in that regard, like tremors are generally well controlled, but then under stress they come on. If that's the case, like giving a presentation, somebody who's working and has to give a talk may say, gosh, when I give a talk, my tremor gets so much worse because that adrenaline's going. And for somebody like that, we may prescribe a low dose of a beta blocker, medicine like propranolol or Inderal, to lessen that kind of adrenaline response and keep the tremor from worsening. Breakthrough tremor, I don't know if they also might mean, wearing off where the tremor returns between doses, and that would be sort of a different answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zauber. Ryan, my husband fell twice in 2 weeks, resulting in 2 surgeries. What are some good walking devices to help prevent falls?
That's a great question, and I'll probably punt a little bit this to Hillary as well to help answer that. I think one of the key things is, there are multiple devices out there, and no one particular device is ideal over another one, other than what works best for that individual at the time. Plus, we got to look at what actually is kind of leading to falls as well. Is it the mobility issue? Is it the balance issue? Is there a cognitive component with that as well? And so, yes, there's different types of walking devices, between rollators that have like the 4 wheels with a basket, to a standard rolling walker, to specialty walkers meant to help with a gait with Parkinson's patients. I think probably one of the key things I'd be looking at too is, if we're seeing falls, increasing falls, one of the things is maybe talking to your primary care physician and maybe even getting a referral for physical therapy just to assess their overall functional gait to determine what would be the best option for individuals who are having falls and are looking into a specific device. Hillary?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. That was, yeah, that was good. There's definitely certain types of walkers that we recommend, or devices depending, or that are more often for people with Parkinson's. I typically will recommend a rollator walker over just like one with the 2 wheels in the front. Sometimes canes are appropriate. There's also a type of walker that has been designed for patients with Parkinson's, and that's called a U-step walker. So that provides a little bit more stability, but all of the devices, it depends on, it depends on the person and really what they're having difficulty with. So
great.
Definitely recommend, coming to to do an assessment if you're not sure and having falls, like Ryan said.
Thank you both. Dr. Sinha, do we need post-care forms notarized, or will the forms be accepted by the medical staff, just signed by the patient only?
Excellent question. So the advantage of a post form is that it does not require a lawyer or a notary. It does, however, require a patient who has the capacity to make those decisions. And in the absence of a patient who may have the capacity to make those complex decisions, it does need to have a legal surrogate. So that means a named healthcare representative who actually has a designation via a legal document who can then sign on their behalf, but no need for a notary or a lawyer. And now the state of Indiana allows physicians as well as advanced practice providers, nurse practitioners, as well as physician assistants who have had these discussions to be able to sign, and it becomes a legal document, which is portable, honored across all settings. That means the home, ER, hospital facility, it's the same document that is the property of a patient, travels anywhere and is honored anywhere.
Great, thank you. Ashley, can you recommend a good site online for art therapy videos or live art therapy?
There are a lot of really great resources online. If you do a YouTube search on pretty much any medium, you can find lots of lots of videos from art instructors. There's one that I really like. She's a lot of fun to watch. Her name is Cassie Stevens. She's an elementary art teacher, but I think her videos are really appropriate for anyone. Also, the Parkinson's Foundation Health at Home series is another good resource for live art therapy experientials. And I mentioned before, we're going to be doing one in July and another in November. Some other great resources online you can think about right now are a lot of art museums around the world have all their collection on display online. And that can be a great way to even get the benefits of neuroaesthetics and viewing artwork as a way of reducing stress. And it can also be a good way of getting some inspiration for things to do on your own.
Great, thank you. Dr. Zauber, what advances are there in treatment of Parkinson's dementia? Is donepezil, I know I'm not pronouncing that correctly, the best option at the present time?
So Parkinson's dementia can be treated. That's important to know, because I think sometimes people don't realize that. And the medicine that's been best studied is one called rivastigmine. The other name for that medicine is Exelon. That's a once-a-day skin patch medicine. And that was specifically studied in Parkinson's disease dementia and showed improvements. The medicine that was mentioned here, donepezil, is very similar in how it works in the body to Exelon or rivastigmine. And the main difference is it's an oral medicine. So for some people, an oral medicine may work better for them. For other people, the skin patch medicine may work better for them. There's also sometimes cost issues, but the equivalency hasn't been directly tested, but we use the two of them quite often.
Thank you. Ashley, is art therapy, excuse me one moment. Is art therapy versus OT and PT for specific goals? And I apologize because I'm not, let me pause on that question. We'll go back to it, okay? All right, I'm just gonna go straight to another one. Dr. Sinha, how do I know when I am ready for palliative care?
So I think, just going back to how I described it, palliative care doesn't always have to be done by a specialist. It can also be done by your own team, your primary team, whoever you're most comfortable with and is equipped to deliver that. So we actually propagate that palliative care starts at the time of diagnosis of any disease. So that's really the short answer. But if the question is, when am I ready for specialty palliative care? I think that would be something to ask your core group of providers and just find out if there are troublesome symptoms, and if you have distress and need and desire to discuss advanced care planning in more depth, and that's something that they feel it is a good plan for you to have a specialized team for, then, or if you feel that truly you just want to explore whether there is added benefit, that's also a time to just say there is no harm once you enter palliative care. Just like I said, it is not equitable to end-of-life care. We have patients who we see one time and then we say, call us when you need us kind of thing, and give them all the information. And then there are patients I've been seeing in my clinic for the last 3 or 4 years who check in every couple of months for whatever needs they have. And it's on an as needed basis.
Great, thank you. Ryan or Hillary, or you both can answer this. Can physical activity help with neuroplasticity and retraining the brain? And I just want to say, if one of you can define what neuroplasticity is first, that would be very helpful.
I can go ahead on that. So neuroplasticity is basically kind of summarizing that your brain is not as hardwired as we think. You know, we learn throughout our entire life, and even as we age, our brain is still capable of learning even after specific injuries. You know, you go back to retraining that injury. When it comes to neuro, it is tapping into kind of your previous learned motor patterns and reestablishing those pathways. The challenge is obviously is with neurological injuries, if something is completely lost or damaged to 100%, the likelihood of something returning is very slim. So what we're looking at is using the other parts of our body and other parts of our brain to make stronger neural connections to help retrain the body in appropriate movement. And so leading into both physical therapy and occupational therapy, obviously the goal is, especially with Parkinson's, is trying to maximize our motor learning pathways. So, you know, if we're sedentary, obviously we're not going to be able to move around as much. So kind of going back to the high intensity activity, like with rock steady boxing, you know, the more we're able to move, the more we can learn those motor pathways. Like if we are unsteady with our balance, if we have difficulty using our hands, all that type of activity does help enhance that neuroplasticity. So it's like a use it or lose it kind of mentality. Hillary?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. Physical activity is really shown to increase like neuronal excitability, increase the number of synapses in your brain with those neurons. And with our patients, you know, it's shown that exercise could potentially slow disease progression, especially in like the early phases of Parkinson's. And we see like increased walking speeds and just better overall quality of life. People are doing more, they're moving better, the more activity they get. One of the recommendations I often will do is like for every 30 minutes, like try to get up and move for 10 of those minutes so that you're not sitting all day. You know, after a lot of times people are like sitting for 4 hours and then they don't realize and they're stiff and it takes a while to kind of get up and get loosened up. So that's something that's kind of easy to start implementing, is just a little bit more of activity can really help.
Great, thank you both. Dr. Zauber, how can I get relief from my dizziness so I can exercise?
Good question. So dizzy is kind of a tricky symptom for neurologists because it can mean a lot of different things to different people. Sometimes people use the word dizzy to mean spinning, like vertigo, and that often is an inner ear problem and not a direct Parkinson's problem. In Parkinson's, sometimes people use the word dizzy to mean that they're feeling off balance. In this case, I might guess that the person means lightheaded. And that is a very common problem that we see in Parkinson's, that people can have low blood pressure. So if someone is feeling sort of dizzy in this regard, I would strongly suggest that they check their blood pressure sitting down and then check their blood pressure standing up and see if there's a difference between those numbers. Many times what happens, we go to the doctor measures blood pressure sitting, and it looks normal in someone with Parkinson's, but when they're standing up, the blood pressure may actually drop, again, due to the autonomic changes in the nervous system and due to some of the Parkinson's medicines that can lower blood pressure. So in this person, I'd be concerned that their blood pressure may be running too low. And that might mean that they need to have their medicines adjusted. Maybe they're taking a medicine for high blood pressure, or they need to do other things to raise their blood pressure, like adding salt to their diet, wearing compression socks. So there are things that can be done. But the first step is to find out if the blood pressure is too low when you stand.
So reaching out to your doctor. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Ashley. Is art therapy considered long-term versus something like OT and PT for specific goals?
It really depends on the context of art therapy and also the needs of the person that we're working with. Things like wellness groups, like our new program that we're developing, is short-term, and it's more focused on, the inherent nature of art making as being relaxing, therapeutic, and connecting with other people. But if you were to engage in individual art therapy with an art therapist, it's typically more of a psychotherapeutic approach where, we're working with clients to address mental health concerns like anxiety, depression, grief, loss, and everything tied in with that. And depending on a person's goals and how we support them, it can be a longer process. But I think what's important for anyone entering this kind of relationship is to know that that's totally up to the person we're working with and what their needs are.
Thank you. So there's a question that was asked to Rock Steady Boxing, and they are not on this panel, but I just wanted to address it really quick. So someone asked if Rock Steady Boxing had DVDs for people who are in remote areas, and they do not, unfortunately, but they do have classes via Zoom, and I will include that information in a follow-up email next week. So I just wanted to address that question. Dr. Sinha, if I transition to palliative care, do I still see my regular doctor? And also, where do I have my palliative care? Is that at home? Is it in a facility, or can it vary?
The first part is that no, palliative care does not mean you lose out on your regular team. Palliative care is like a consulting team, just like any other consulting team. So that is one difference I think probably is important to also say, that I had shown that little graph where when you are at the end stage and you accept hospice, that's sort of accepting that you are choosing now a comfort-based approach. And it does come with some understanding that you're not wanting to go through ICU stays and tests and procedures. So there is sometimes a kind of step down, de-escalation from seeing multiple consultants. In palliative care, however, we are one supportive team, which is in addition to your regular team. So we do not replace, and we actually very consciously educate our patients about that, we are not here to replace your regular team, and most of the medical concerns should always be in collaboration with them, because it's very important that anything we do cannot just be done in a silo or in isolation, because, the medical interactions and treatments and everything we must communicate. So that's a big part of our work, is actually collaborating with patients' primary team members or specialty team members. And then the second thing I think is, where can it be delivered? It's an interesting specialty, the nature of how it's delivered and the sheer low volume of specialists who do palliative care allowed it to grow most robustly within the inpatient side initially. So for example, in IU Health, palliative care is 10 years old. And for the first 5 years, it was almost entirely all inpatient. In the last 5 years, however, we have grown. We have some the biggest advantage, in my opinion, is community palliative care. And we are now able to offer that, definitely in outpatient clinic space, which are specified locations. We are embedded within certain specialty areas. But now with the advent of virtual technology, we are trying to deliver palliative care visits at home and do assessments virtually. So that's one aspect. And then the part with the facilities is, I am hearing more and more teams being developed to be able to go to facilities. I think it just becomes logistically challenging and a lot of administrative things that need to be coordinated with facilities. So yes, there's that. And actually a very new pilot that IU Health has started is within the local Indianapolis area. We have a home-based team now that is able to see patients who are unable to get out of their house even.
Great, thank you, Dr. Sinha. Ryan, what type of assistive technology would you recommend for computer use, such as mouse, keyboard, voice control?
Well, really, a lot of it times, you can do kind of a low tech as far as assessing your computer. You can usually look at the specific settings of a computer. So you can set up your keyboard so that the key sensitivity is minimized so that when you accidentally hit a key, it doesn't automatically travel across your screen. There's also ways that you can adjust your mouse with that as well, so that the mouse sensitivity to help with tremors is that if you have a tremulous hand, that the mouse itself doesn't trail across the screen super fast, so you can slow down the speed of that. So there's things within your computer settings that you can do. There are different type of mouse pads, like a trackpad versus using an actual traditional mouse. I've had some patients try a rollerball mouse back in the day where we had just a rollerball. So you're not having to track the hand, but you can use one digit to kind of help control that device. Even within your computer setting itself, there is speech software, and a lot of the newer computers and even some of the older computers have that capability as well. The challenge sometimes, though, that individuals may have is their regulating their voice volume. And so sometimes the microphone may not pick up on that. So sometimes a voice amplifier box. And this is kind of where I coordinate a lot with the speech therapist as well, because the technology, when we're talking into speech to text software, a lot of that, I coordinate that with the speech therapist, primarily because they can do an assessment of the type of technology that work for them, what their voice volume is like, their strength of their voice, if they do have some dysarthria or going on affecting their voice quality control, can impact your ability to use speech to text software. So when in doubt, usually there's some low tech technologies, and then obviously when in doubt too, getting in touch with your provider and then having a formal evaluation with the therapist to help you really kind of coordinate that care that's best for you.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to continue on this track, and Hillary and Ryan, you can follow up also. Can OT and PT describe how they use robots in rehab therapy?
Yeah, I can start. So at our clinic, we're fortunate to have a couple different body weight support systems. So that's just where you're in a harness, either over ground or over a treadmill, or we have one that your feet are attached and helping kind of retrain that normal gait cycle or the walking cycle to increase step length, steps or walking speed. We have different balance systems. So where it's kind of like a force plate, like a reactive force plate, we can challenge that with kind of movement of that plate, or having goal directed targets. So on the screen, it'll be interactive where you have to shift your weight forward or back or side to side, trying to get to a target, and just to kind of to push your center of gravity and retrain that weight shifting, which is often can be a challenge with Parkinson's.
Also using again, being blessed with the technology we have, one of the things we have is the ability to kind of look at ocular motor movements as well. So obviously we know with Parkinson's, sometimes we have a difficulty with oculomotor control, have problems with that downward gaze. And so we can utilize our vision technology to kind of really help you work on visual scanning, motor visual strengthening of the eyes. With the upper extremities, again, it's kind of like the repetition movement, consistently doing something over and over again to help that motor relearning pathway. So it's kind of a nice way to really challenge that, and then kind of track it over time, how a person has improved or what other areas tend to come up and how we can address those needs.
Thank you both. Dr. Zauber, please talk about focused ultrasound as treatment options for Parkinson's, as a treatment option for Parkinson's.
So focused ultrasound is a type of neurosurgical procedure. Many people may be familiar with deep brain stimulation surgery. Deep brain stimulation surgery has been around for 20 to almost 30 years now. Before deep brain stimulation was around, surgeons would actually go ahead and make a hole in the brain in certain areas that control movement, similar areas to where we place the deep brain stimulating electrodes currently. And they would do that, make that hole in the brain by opening the skull and inserting a temporary wire and then removing it. Then deep brain stimulation surgery came around, and that was deemed preferable because it didn't involve destroying brain tissue at all. It simply involved stimulating the same areas of the brain. So the effects were more reversible. Focused ultrasound is in some ways a step forward and in some ways a step back. So the step forward is that the skull is not opened in focused ultrasound. So ultrasound beams, the same ones that are used sort of, to see a baby in the womb, get focused with this very special equipment that we don't yet even have at IU, and focuses the ultrasound in such a way that a neurosurgeon can target the same areas of the brain that are targeted in deep brain stimulation surgery, but to focus that and make a hole in the brain. So it makes a lesion. So that's the step backwards. So unlike DBS, where the effects can be adjusted and are reversible, focused ultrasound creates a permanent lesion in the brain, a hole. And so the advantage of focused ultrasound is that it could be offered to people who were not DBS candidates if they were unable to undergo anesthesia, for example, or if they were deemed to not be a good candidate for implanted hardware. Maybe we thought they would have problems with skin healing or infections with implanted hardware, then this could be an option for them. I don't think it's likely to replace DBS, however, because it is destructive in some way to the brain tissue, which means it may cause side effects that are permanent. It's still relatively new. It's not something that most centers have any experience doing yet, but it's likely to be something that's expanding over time. And I think of it as one more tool in our toolbox of treating symptoms.
Thank you, Dr. Zauber. Dr. Sinha, regarding the Indiana Healthcare Representative Appointment Form, there is a list of hierarchy of family. Can I choose a niece or nephew over my sister, as my sister is significantly older than myself?
Yes, it really should be anybody who you choose. And I think the advice we give our patients, and what I would give you, is that choose someone who you feel can uphold and respect your wishes the best. So I actually have told some of my patients that, this is not at all, don't carry that burden that it's a popularity test for who you love more, because, sometimes I've had patients struggle with that should I choose this child versus that child? And really, it's not about, who you love more. It's about who is strong enough to uphold your wishes, because sometimes those who love us more have a harder time upholding what your wishes are. And so if you feel that one of your family members is not right, either due to their own illness or comorbidities or age or whatever reason, it is very important to choose the person who will be able to talk for you and represent you the best when you can't. That's really who you should choose. So it can be even a friend for that matter.
Great, thank you so much. Ashley, this is a little away from the art question, but I want to just present this question to you because you do have a background in psychiatric settings also. And if you feel uncomfortable or if you can't answer this, that's completely fine, but I wanted to pose it. So how best can caregivers / family provide an atmosphere of safety for those having hallucinations of hurt and danger?
I have a lot of experience working with people with psychosis, so I can touch on this a bit. The most important thing you can remember as a care partner is just to stay calm and reassuring. The one thing you don't want to do is to argue or try to reason with the person who's experiencing the hallucinations, because those kind of behaviors can escalate the intensity of the things the person's experiencing. If a person really is in immediate danger, you can take them to a hospital. Let's say if they're a danger to themselves or others. And if you would do that, of course, bring your aware and care kit. If the hallucinations are non-threatening, by all means, please tell your providers, because oftentimes medication side effects, can contribute to those symptoms.
Great, thank you. Great answer. And just to be respectful of everyone's time, I'm going to ask one more question. So Dr. Zauber, this last question goes to you, and I think it's a very important one. Is there a way to put your name on a list of potential candidates for Parkinson's related research? Maybe you can answer that on a local level and on a national level.
Great, yeah, so locally, you can if you're a patient of ours at IU, you could let your neurologist know that you're interested in research, and then we'd be glad to keep you on a list of people that we might call on when we have new studies. On a national level, there is something called the Michael J. Fox Foundation Clinical Trial Finder, which I think of it as kind of like match.com for studies, matchmaking service. Essentially, people with Parkinson's go onto the website and enter in their age, when they were diagnosed with Parkinson's, what medicines they take, how far they're willing to travel. And then centers like ours who are doing studies enter the age range that they're looking for, the disease duration they're looking for, meds that are allowed, and then it actually matches people. And so if I was running a study, I might actually get a message, here are 5 people that meet your criteria and are in your radius, and then we could reach out to those people to find out if they would qualify for the study.
Great, thank you. And that is a great tool. Like you said, I think it is the one that is most user-friendly as well, Fox Trial Finder. So everyone, that concludes our program today. I really want to thank all of these wonderful speakers who provided their time and expertise today. We really appreciate it. And most importantly, to all of you in the Parkinson community who attended, because you are the ones who continue to inspire us. So thank you again to all of you. And again, don't forget to fill out those evaluations if you have time. It will pop up on your screen. And be well and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you again, everyone.